You mean it doesn't sound like the Rifleman, huh?
I love this photo because it's like a sense of glee. He's like genuinely, really happy to hold that thing.
I don't know if that's glee or he just said, I will pick you up.
And he just got up and ran over a ridge and was just like, I'm out. That came right
for what you wish for, brother.
Started screaming, oh no! You can believe it, we blew up a 421.
That's a crime.
We figure everybody gets a mulligan on that.
Hi, my name is Mike Haneen, and I'm the co-host of the all-new Audiophile Gamer Podcast, presented by VZR, dedicated to winning sound. Sound is one of the most important aspects of modern video games, and our podcast is dedicated to both the art of game audio creation and the tech that drives it. Together with legendary music producer and engineer, Sir Mix-a-Lot, we're going to go behind the scenes with the real folks creating the amazing sound we experience in video games. So if you have a passion for both games and audio, this channel is for you. So click the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications on future podcasts. Thank you. First, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm really thrilled because this is our debut episode. Co-hosting with me is Anthony Ray. We all know and love him as Sir Mix-a-Lot. And we also have the entire audio team from Infinity Ward. So, folks, let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be a lot of fun. Can I maybe have everybody say their names and their titles and the roles?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Stephen Miller. I'm the audio director at Infinity Ward.
Hi, I'm Stuart Provine. I'm the principal sound designer at Infinity Ward.
I'm Tim Stasica. I'm the senior lead technical sound designer at Infinity Ward.
I'm Dave Rowe. I'm senior lead audio designer at Infinity Ward.
I'm David Natali. I'm the dialogue lead at Infinity Ward.
You know, I actually was thinking back. I played the very first Call of Duty back when it was released, I think, in 2003. And back then, I pre-ordered the game and actually received a special edition soundtrack with Michael Giacchino's score, which was like unbelievable. I mean, I was blown away. And I know he had previously worked on Medal of Honor. I think it was Medal of Honor. It was Allied Assault, or I forget which version. But, you know, that was a really defining moment for me personally, because these were games that were using real score, like real orchestra, and it was just mind blowing. So, I'm curious, you know, starting off, you know, you have this amazing legacy of Call of Duty going back to the era of World War II, right? You know, starting off with that era, and then you've covered all kinds of different time periods. And I was thinking about this. You must have an ungodly amount of gun recordings throughout that whole, you know, from different eras, right? In time. So I kind of want to just jump right to that. I mean, really, what's it like, you know, having that many, and what have you done this time that's different than, say, like previous, you know, versions of Call of Duty?
Just in my time with Infinity Ward, I've been here since the original Modern Warfare. And we have an immense collection of weapon recordings of all different kinds, even back to the early COD 1 and COD 2 that still sits in the library for all the World War II weapons. But a lot has changed technology-wise since then, with recorders, different mics that are available now, and we've changed recording techniques as well, even though we still bring along John Fasol and still record some of our stuff to Nagra. But a lot has changed, and Stuart can fill you in on quite a bit of that.
Hi, I'm Stuart. I'm the principal sound designer at IW. And yeah, the recording aspect it's a really tricky and really kind of interesting situation when we go out and record. It's usually a pretty big production. You know, we'll have is maybe 6 or 7 people and up to around 100 channels. And, it's one of those things where, like Stephen mentioned, we have really kind of different needs now because the technology has changed and we can play more voices. So the idea of having isolated recordings of aspects of the different weapons becomes really important. And, the guns can switch to be silenced or suppressed, depending on what terminology you want to use. And so we need to have what's the biggest bang for the buck that we can get with the memory that we have available to us. And, these guys will tell you I'm kind of a nut when it comes to trying to get it as realistic as we can. And, we're definitely going to keep pushing towards that. There's some stuff that just because it's foreign military type weapons that we can't always get the real thing, and that's just a reality that we deal with. And we try to choose intelligently what substitutions we make and what compromises we make. But it takes a village. This isn't just go get a cool gun recording. There's all these systems in place in order to make the experience really dynamic. And Tim can talk a lot about things like reflections. We have atmospheres, sort of the tails of the sounds that change depending on where you are, stuff like that. So the recording process part, it has to be broken up into these chunks where it's sometimes it's just get a great sounding gunshot that exists on its own. And then other times you have to get isolated recordings of just tails or of just the mechanics or of just, these things on their own. And it becomes a big wide scale process that takes a long time and is full of a lot more error than success. You know what I mean? It's a lot of trial and error.
I was going to say, we have a ton of recordings, even just from this game, so that we could capture weapons, whether they're interior, exterior, in a desert, exterior, in a city atmosphere where there's reflections. All of that we tried to capture as discreetly as we could so that we could use them to rebuild those lifelike feelings in the game and have it respond naturally to the geo that's actually in.
Stuart touched on that there's new perspectives and things we're trying to capture this time that we haven't touched on in the past. And part of that is just the size of some of the maps. Something like Warzone, we have shooters at distances that we've never had before in Call of Duty. And so when we're recording guns, then you can't just take the player's weapon and throw a filter on it and say, there you go, it's distant. We're capturing the actual sounds of those distant weapons. And so there's all the people gathered around the shooter getting the close shots. And we also have guys recording, a half mile away.
That's amazing.
And we're on walkies and saying, okay, you can come in for lunch now. So when he says it takes a village, it's really that many people. We have this, we have this base of operations and, people just bringing us lunches and, it's a whole crowd that we take out there, big operation to do the recordings.
I want to, if I can jump in real quick here, I just wanted to ask, let's just say something passing overhead. A bullet is a little extreme. It's too fast, but are you guys starting with a mono sound, which is what I do in my world, right? And kind of change azimuth by adjusting EQ and passing it overhead and then going to the other side? Or are you using stereo sounds or are you just recording the movement all different directions? That's a lot of work.
I would say all of the above.
Okay.
It depends on the sound. Yeah. All of what you just mentioned will work. We have stereo sounds that we put in the game. We have surround sounds that we put in the game. There are some things that the source starts off as a mono or maybe just a loop, and then we put Doppler on it, we put filter on it, we put verb on it, change its position in the game. So it depends on it depends on how we're using it in the game, and then it also depends on memory. If in an ideal world, we would capture the sound of what we want in a cinematic type sequence and play it in the game. But games are so dynamic, you don't know what's going to happen when. And so there's a lot of things that we just have to, for memory reasons, put in the closest approximation and then affect it in game dynamically, depending on the situation.
Yeah. And ideally, like you said, we capture the actual sound going overhead of microphones. And we often do that in certain situations when we can. If the context is in the game where the player is generally in the same area, or it's a cutscene where the camera is locked or something like that, we'll actually get the sound of the item passing overhead. And then we also have things in the game like our audio engine renders in 3D space, and it renders in Dolby Atmos. And so there are definitely, processing pieces that go on there when you actually have the sound above your head in the game.
I want to real quick play a video that you all shared with me. Okay, so here's a photo just to kind of give everybody an idea of what's going on here. There's, I don't know how many microphones, it looks like dozens, surrounding the shooters there in the background with the guns. So, I mean, that's pretty amazing. And you're saying that there were even a half mile away people with microphones recording to get that distance. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, the distance actually really became critical, and initially, when we were doing a lot of these recordings, it might be a couple years before the title releases. So we have to do things in anticipation of what might happen in the game. And so it's kind of thinking ahead, and we're sort of going by, what might happen, what we've discussed and things like that. So it's a lot of interpolation and over coverage sometimes in order to have the maximum flexibility later on.
Right.
A lot of file naming too.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of expense and everything that's being used when we fire the weapon, and so and every weapon is different, and every space is different. So we like to, like Stuart said, kind of almost over coverage, while we're out there, because it's very difficult to monitor out there too, because you hear, even though you have headphones on that, may block some sound, you're still getting the feeling of the gun firing in front of you. So when you're listening on your headphones, it's very difficult to actually tell what you're hearing, and you often have to go pause and hit playback and listen on headphones. But again, it's not an ideal listening situation. So over coverage kind of helps in that situation of making sure that you have the material that you're spending money on.
Yeah, quite literally the shotgun approach, right?
Yeah, sometimes you won't know what you really have. There's been so many times, especially when I'm out doing experiments and such, where you think something's not going to work. It's that one mic angle where the stand fell over, or something kind of went wrong in your approach, and you're like, that's the one that's going to suck. And you get back, and that's the one that has the gold on it. And so it's one of those things where you got to always stay open-minded. And if you fall into that trap of thinking you know everything and thinking exactly what's going to work, then you set yourself up for failure. It's having a bunch of people out there who really care about it and who know what they're doing, but also experimenting, and also just being open-minded to it and allowing the inevitable mistakes that are going to happen, because it's one of those things where you're going to be not using the vast majority of those channels, but every now and again you'll come across the magic that just happens to be in that one mic at that one time in that one spot, stuff like that.
So it sounds similar to something we do in music. Like if you're capturing a drummer, you capture everything. I mean, if you can catch a cockroach walking on the floor, you try to track everything just in case that perfection happens.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's what you guys do the same thing, but on steroids.
It's like the Yoko Ono approach to gun recording, just get it all, if you can. But
Well, and it's very much like recording drums. It's a high SPL percussion. So capturing all those different frequencies, whether it be the lows, the mids, and different highs, as far as getting the transients, it's all super important for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm assuming you're trying not to use limiting or compression, because obviously that does away with the dynamic. So you have to make sure you're under digital zero all the time. That's
not necessarily.
That's a lot of settings.
No, it's actually it's not quite like that. Where this is a weapon that sometimes will be 160, 165 dB at the muzzle. It's so incredibly loud that there's no way to kind of contain it. Like if you recorded it a close-up gun in an open space, kind of like in this picture, and you made sure that you didn't go over, you'd probably have a very low gain setting on your recorder, if not with pads, in order to do that. And then if you play that back in your room, it'll literally sound like somebody flicking the microphone capsule with their fingernail. It's the tiniest thing. It's absolutely minuscule sounding and unusable. So it becomes a question of like, what techniques and technology can you use to either really truly capture that dynamic range? And there's new stuff that's much more capable now, but then the traditional way is like people like John Fassel and Charles Maines, real true masters of recording weapons. These guys are amazing. They've been doing it for a long time. And, we have worked with them, but I really consider myself lucky to have been around these guys to kind of learn. But it's a question of what distortion can you live with? What way of squeezing that 10 gallons of juice into an 8-ounce cup can you live with? And there's techniques that work better and techniques that work less well. And as the technology has changed, those techniques have changed. And what I needed out of the stuff became different than what a lot of the traditional approaches were. So we had to kind of invent new ways of doing a lot of it in order to accomplish the game.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're forced. So it sounds like you're forced to maybe accept baked-in results, just because of the nature of the recordings and the fact that you're recording something so loud, and that it's you have to sort of live with using maybe compression and limiting, which kind of bakes in the dynamics into the recording in order to just get something usable. I mean, does that sound accurate?
Yeah, and a lot of it will be not even using. I mean, we'll use limiters. It becomes a question of which distortion flavor works for that particular moment, and whether it's a fast limiter that's on board a mixer or a recorder, or if it's literally just hammering that A to D and just squaring out that first 5 milliseconds, and it's just complete chaos, in terms of what the recorder's getting. And that's the sound, because people are going from years of cinema where they're doing the same thing. They're hammering the inputs on whatever they got. And that is the cinematic, nostalgic, established sound of gunshots in movies and games and things like that. So there's this part of choosing between realism of capture, or, kind of the clinical approach to recording, where you're capturing the entire dynamic range, and ideally like you would in music, and then kind of the reality of YouTube and movies and whatnot, where that distortion is a part of what you consider to be the gunshot you recognize and know and love. And it's kind of like, how do you pick and choose your moments, or your approaches?
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting that you brought up YouTube, because I was going to ask you, which sounds like it's not that applicable, but I was going to ask you about the LUFS kind of standards that YouTube has right now, where they're, I think they're at -14, right? So that's loud units full scale. That's what I know, you guys know that. But I was going to ask you that next, but it looks like you just put the distortion there. And if it's there, if they want to drop it down to neg 14, it's still there. So the harmonic is still present. Sounds like what you're saying.
Well, these guys are going to be able to, like Tim and Dave and Steven. And I mean, everybody has to have a role in sort of what our end loudness and mix levels and all that stuff are. It's way bigger than just the gun recording stuff. The gun recording thing is just a tiny piece of what all these guys have to deal with as a collective whole. I'm sure Dave has got tons to say on LUFS, and both of the Daves actually.
Yeah, whether we're recording dialogue or mixing the game, there's a lot that goes into it. Dave primarily mixes the game with the rest of our feedback, especially when it comes to the campaign. Tim mixes the game when it comes to multiplayer, which is a crazy difficult task, especially when we went from being, hey, it's 12 players to, hey, it's 150 players, and a huge map and lots of new systems and tech that had to be created for us to even be able to do Warzone. But when recording and dealing with the guns and everything, we're trying to keep the right flavor of things. And with Call of Duty and our approach that we've generally taken, it's a fine line between what is real and what is Hollywood. There's even been stuff that we've kind of helped to do over time along with other media on trying to get away from what everybody thought was a suppressed weapon and went pew pew, which is absolutely not reality, but it is Hollywood reality. And it has gone on for, decades. And starting for us in Ghosts was probably the first game that we stepped completely away from that and started going more realistic. And there's been great movies and other things that have come out like Zero Dark 30 who have really helped to teach people what a suppressed or silenced weapon actually sounds like, and that they're really not that quiet.
Yeah, that's sort of it almost like a meme, right? With the suppressed and silencer type sounds like choo-choo, that you hear in just about every TV show or movie. And yeah, that's interesting how it's something everybody who's sort of like been around those types of things are like, that is not what it sounds like, So yeah.
I have an HK93 and every now and then I'll go out back and pling with it a little bit. Yeah, after 3 shots, it's like, that's what I hear for the next 15 minutes.
HK93s are fun. That's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I believe that first big gun is the Barrett. Is that the Barrett 50 cal? Or is that a different?
Yeah, it was.
sniper?
Yeah.
Okay.
First one prone on the ground.
It's like a cannon. I mean, that thing is amazing.
It's a handful.
Let me go back actually on and.
Yeah, when we go back, I want to talk about those lines. I want to see what that represents. But go ahead.
Yeah, so that's this is the next segment, Anthony, where they talk about are those the reflections?
That's right. Yeah.
This was our first recording trip to record reflections, and this is in Florida, and we worked together with Watson Wu, as well as a big part of the Infinity War team to go out to this abandoned prison / hospital / all kinds of. It was a really odd location, but we were able to do both blank and live fire to some extent. And what the lines are is us trying to not capture the shooter, but to capture just the reflections. So it's kind of us trying to bounce the sounds off of the buildings and capture just the reflection. This allowed us to capture source that we could bring back into what we had created, our reflection system in the game. Tim can give a little bit more information on the system itself.
We all want to talk about this. On this picture that you have of the reflections, so where the red arrows are starting off, those were our shooter positions. And so they were shooting, straight ahead. And we would be around the corner where those arrows are ending up. And so we were, obstructed by buildings by, this is like a 6-8 story building. And so we were completely obstructed from the shooter position around a corner, recording, echoes off of wall surfaces. And in the game, what we do with these sounds, every time that the shooter fires his weapon, there's raycasts drawn out various directions from the shooter to geometry in game. And if it hits a wall, it tells the game, I hit a wall this far away, play a sound over there. And according to the speed of sound and the distance that surface is, it plays a reflection over there.
Impressive.
It gives the player a really good sense of space. You know if you're in an interior versus an exterior or an alley or a wide open plane. And every shot in the game that you fire is going to sound different dynamically depending on your position.
That's fascinating. So you developed a proprietary system, or is this part of an engine that you're using? Or, I'm just curious if it's custom.
It's a proprietary system. It's not something that we bought or licensed out or anything like that. We started mocking it up before Ghosts, I would say. We had a demo that was just like, it was just a one building that we pulled from a previous Call of Duty, and really slowly in script, we just had waits that were like, wait for a player to fire and then play sounds at these positions. And it ran really slow. It was all like a little demo that I had scripted up. And then in Infinite Warfare, we got it coded into the game. And then with a lot of talking with Stuart really championed like the directions, where it should be, what the reflections should sound like. Stuart organized these recording sessions and, really, really pushed the sound of the whole system. And I think we got it fine-tuned in this game.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we definitely need to give a shout out to programmers, because all of us, we dream big. Like we ask for a lot. We want that game engine that runs at 60 frames a second, or even if you're on PC up to 120. We want basically real world tools. We want our Pro Tools rig to be able to do all these things in real time. And so they do a lot for us. And if not for them, then the game wouldn't sound the way it does.
And so, some of this stuff, like it's when we go out, I'm not, Stuart's the gun guy, Dave, Steven, and I don't have my own guns. I don't go out shooting much. I have occasionally with these guys, but when I go out to a recording session with them or go out and listen to them shoot, you hear how the guns bounce off of everything. You hear the distant echoes. You hear just how much it livens your environment. And it's not at all that single shot you hear in a movie. There's so much going on. There's so much energy being thrown downfield, and we're trying to capture that and play that back in the game. And it's not just a single sound. It's things happening all over the place.
So you mean it doesn't sound like the Rifleman, huh?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the spaces. When you're recording drums, right, Anthony, you really want to find that right space, especially for that drum, for that set. And we have to kind of take that concept and go outside with it and find the right acoustic space outside. And so we're looking at walls. We're looking at, there's a connex over there that's going to give this reflection in the middle of the tail, and then I can't use the tail. We're looking at the geography of a bowl, let's say, or a canyon, and figuring out where's the best place to put the shooter, and then where's the best place to put our microphones, so that we get the target that we're looking for and make it usable as well.
If you're in just flat land, you're not going to get any low end in your recordings whatsoever. So the geography and the geometry of what's around you does play a very important part to our recordings.
With this location in Florida and with the recording in Arizona, we were looking at satellite maps and trying to determine, like, this place looks good, this group of buildings looks good, and trying to, Stuart was making drawings like this, trying to plan out what we would do. And then when we got there, we'd drive to those locations and take out a starter pistol, and we'd all be running around. And one guy stayed, like, I think this is going to be the shooter position, fires a starter pistol, and we're all running like, I think I hear something off that wall. I think I hear something off this wall. Oh, this canyon over here is really carrying echoes. And we probably spent most of the first day in Florida, like, setting up at various locations and trying to find where we're going to record. It's like the biggest drum room in the world, trying to find those yep. good echoes.
Yeah, like Tim says, the recording trips are often broken up into purpose, right? Where you're not just going, let's go record some guns. It's let's try and get reflections for this particular set of environments. So, a narrow spectrum of spots. And we've just focused our entire energy on that, where the shoots are organized and everybody has a clear vision of what we're trying to get out of that shoot. It's just such a monumental task to kind of consider the totality that we have to break it up into chunks where, we're just trying to be the most efficient as we can in terms of prioritizing the category or prioritizing whatever the thing is we're trying to get that time. And then if we get targets of opportunity, other little subcategories of things, we'll try and get that. And, it's recording outside. We are dealing with weather. We are dealing with traffic. We are dealing with airplanes going overhead. The Air Force training. Sometimes there's some random crap that will happen to ruin what you thought you were there for. And then you have to improvise and be quick and say, okay, we're here. We got all this stuff. What else can we get? So
and you swear sometimes you're like, that guy in that plane, he sees us down here and he's circling on purpose trying to figure out what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, why does he keep coming back? It's like you deal with it. We develop a weird language when we're at these, like, I remember in Florida just looking over at Dave, and Dave was always doing this steering wheel thing. Like, it's, Dave had mics that could pick up the freeway, and he knew like 10 seconds before the rest of us that a truck was coming. Wind,
truck, plane. Dave Rowe is really, really sharp at a lot of things, and just all these guys are amazing. But he'll also have an app on his phone sometimes watching air traffic and saying, okay, we got about 45 seconds right now before this plane comes and we'll ruin the shot.
These damn youngsters.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
That's when we have internet service. Right. Sometimes we're so far out here we don't have internet service.
I would love to see your mic closet. You guys must have like thousands of microphones for just different applications. That's insane. Love it.
There's definitely a large collection, and there's personal collections too, like that Tim, Stuart, everybody has a lot of their own gear as well. And particularly when it comes to vintage gear, we bought, or I should say I bought a couple of old Cooper mixers that we were able to use for different recording trips. Like the corporation's not going to buy gear that they can't, use in their taxes and devaluate over time. So when it comes to like vintage gear, we buy it ourselves and make sure that we're getting, the best sound we can. The whole team's incredibly passionate about that, and you'll hear more and more stories. So,
and obviously, you put the vintage stuff further away, right? Because you don't necessarily want to have an oops moment with that.
There's casualties in this kind of stuff, and you have to accept that.
If you can believe it, we blew up a 421.
Wow. An MD 421?
That's a crime.
The whole capsule blew on an explosion shoot.
Wow.
Somebody should have been arrested.
It's not the only one we've destroyed here. There's been many. Even with contractors and stuff who've come out with us, like John Fasal, we've blown up a couple of his mics as well, and then we have to replace them.
Of course, yeah. Wow. I'm curious on the reflections. Are you capturing them sort of the same approach where you have multiple microphones, or the reason why I'm asking is to get a sense, are you spatializing them in the engine, or are you trying to capture them with spatialization? I'm just curious, like, for example, are you capturing them stereo, mono, and then sort of doing your, integrating it into the engine or your proprietary reflection system and having it sort of do its magic? A little bit of both. I'm just curious.
A little bit of both.
Okay.
We'll record them both in stereo and mono, or stereo pairs, mid-side, whatever.
I see.
And then in the game, it depends on your closeness. So if a reflection is coming off of a wall that is 100 yards away from you, that doesn't really make sense to be heard in stereo.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be a wide sound. You want it coming from a specific point. But if you are right up against a wall firing a weapon, or the wall is right next to you, a foot away from you on your right side, and you fire a weapon, that's probably going to splash back to you in stereo. You're going to hear that a little bit in your, front right and your rear right speaker.
Awesome.
And so then that echo sound will, and so we have a way of playing stereo sounds and folding it down over distance as you get far away. Stuart came up with another idea. We can play a sound in stereo. As you back away from it, it can fold down into a mono, and then when you get really far away, it might spread back out into stereo and be a bigger ambient sound that isn't that positional.
I'm going to play the rest of the video since we're talking about reflections, because there's some really cool examples there, and maybe you guys can comment on that further. So I'm going to go ahead and play it. Yeah. They're very interesting how you have such a wide array of different environments. I mean, that just, it's incredible how much you've been able to capture in the game.
We did a little tour of abandoned locations of Southern California, kind of like up by Big Bear and out in Palm Springs, and having a shooter shoot in different environments. Stuart can go more into what they had to go through, but we're up by Big Bear shooting into cabins, and it's just like these abandoned tiny cabins, like bathroom-sized cabins, and we have our shooter just leaning into it and firing in windows.
Are you sure they're abandoned?
The whole cabin is.
You gotta make sure. All clear.
Yeah, they were falling apart, and it's these little tiny shacks that we're shooting into, and just packed with mics inside. And nobody in there, just the shooter leaning in with his with a shotgun and firing, and like the cabins are just falling apart, and debris falling down with every shot, and noxious fumes coming out, just filled with spent gunpowder, and stirring up all kinds of rat trappings, and it was just terrible environment. Like, I can't believe our shooters lived through this and did it for us. But man, the sounds that we got out of it was. It's really, really great sounds that we got.
All in the name of art. I love it.
I got to ask the one nasty question here real quick. Just real quick. You can answer that. But I got to ask. I realize no humans were hurt in the creation of these games, but I was listening to the headshots. People creeping up on you, but they didn't quite see you. And then the shooter goes, blah, blah, blah. You see the crosshairs. And you hear this. I'm trying to figure out. I got to ask, what are you guys using? Please tell me not a real head. That's probably cabbage. That's what they used to use back in the day. What do they use now?
Cadavers, right? No, I'm just joking.
It can be all kinds of stuff. It's just one of those things where sounds like that have to cut through a mix, but still kind of tell you the story of what's happening and give you the sense, the satisfaction, the kind of a morbid satisfaction, And so it'll be a lot of stuff. It could be a real bullet hitting a coconut, and mixed with close-up Foley of gore done with eggs and who knows what else. It's one of those things where you draw from a million different places to kind of create some signature sounds like that have the dual necessity of cutting through a really busy mix. And so it becomes really tricky to have the little combination that sells all that.
I wouldn't want to be in the studio next to the guy that goes, "Yep, that sounds accurate."
That's exactly what it sounds like.
Get the hell out of here.
That might be me.
I won't ask.
I mean, so this is actually a perfect segue because we're talking about Foley. And actually this segment right here, I'm going to play in the video, kind of touches on all the Foley work. So I'm going to go ahead and play that if y'all are okay with that.
MG42.
Yeah.
Yeah, accept no substitute.
And then I'll do some chamois.
That's pretty incredible. Like just seeing all the now, are those your Foley stages or different Foley stages of different studios? I'm just curious.
They're different Foley stages. All of the weapon Foley, predominantly anyway, was recorded at Warner Brothers.
Okay.
And actually not on a Foley stage. Stuart and a couple of the guys would go on the weekends and work with Brian Watkins there and record on a dubbing stage. So it was super quiet. And then later on, you see Gary Hecker, that's Sony Pictures, and he did all of our cinematic.
I see.
Yeah, we would partner with armorers who would, be responsible for bringing in the weapons, and then Brian and I and Dave Natale and Tim, you were at one of these shoots, I think, and Chris Eggert, who's a really talented sound designer who's on our team, who's not here today, but he's amazing. People would take turns coming in and recording. Sometimes I would be the sort of Foley artist with the guns, and then other times it would be the really professional armor team from our. Can we mention who our partners are on this? I think we can, right, Stephen?
We worked with Larry Zanoff at ISS and his team of armorers there. A fantastic group of people.
And just some of the weapon systems are so either complicated, delicate, or heavy that I wouldn't be able to do. I kind of knew what I want out of the recordings, and I know firearms well enough to be able to kind of do that myself if they'll let me. But they're also there, and there's a whole bunch of times where I don't have any experience with a lot of the really exotic stuff for the National Firearms Act controlled items, things like that. That those guys are going to be the ones doing all the manipulation on that. But it's another one of those things where it takes all these different people coming in and establishing their own techniques, their own tastes and approaches. And I don't want to dictate what everybody does with their recorders and their mics, because I don't know enough about it to be able to really have the best approach. And with everybody there being so talented in their own right and with their own ideas, it just ends up being a much more diverse kind of palette to work from later on. And I think it's by far the best way to go is like bring in really smart, talented people and let them do their thing, and then go from there.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a great approach. I'm curious, Stuart, like, what's your background with firearms? Are you, I'm just maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, I grew up in a really rural place, upstate New York, in between Binghamton and Syracuse, and I was into guns as a kid. I'd go hunting on my parents' property. We had 160 acres on a dirt road. I didn't have to walk to school in the snow both ways, but it was something where it actually kind of was like that a little bit, where when it would flood, we would have to kayak to the cars that we'd park about a mile away down this dirt road. It was exciting. It had its moments, right? But
you had a kayak to school? Is that what?
We would kayak to the car
backwards.
The house would literally, the valley where the house was would get so flooded that we would have to kayak from the bottom of the driveway to the cars about a mile away.
Oh, wow.
And then sometimes the school bus would come pick me up, at the edge of the floodwater kind of thing. It was interesting, but it wasn't that. Anyway, so there was a big gun culture there, and so I always was drawing guns in school and would get in trouble for having pictures and that I draw of 1911s on my notebooks and whatever. But I do know a fair number of people in the firearms industry. I have trained with some really talented and amazing, experienced people like Larry Vickers, Mike Pannone, a bunch of other people who, at least with some of them, I'm really honored to call them friends. And so,
and they're gun experts, or like what the names you mentioned, are they experts in firearms? Or
Yeah, they're absolutely experts, and I'm just kind of one of these people who likes to be along there and try to keep up with these guys who were a lot more experienced and well trained, and but I like taking classes and things like that. So it's part of my hobbies, and there's Dave. I don't know if you want to own up to any of your experience with it, but there's some of us there who really are dedicated to making it as real as we can, and but also making sure that we never forget that there's a whole bunch of people who aren't gun folks, and they want to have the satisfaction of what their expectations are such that are based in other games and movies and things like that. And we can't nerd out so much that we make them feel alienated or lost. And so it becomes, like Steven said, this compromise between realism and Hollywood. And how do you walk that line in a way that you please the most people?
From the Foley gun recording that we were doing back there, Stuart, when he does know the gun, he really works into those guns, and especially for the Foley, he gets to where his heart rate is going, and I have to tell him, Stu, you need to take a break because I hear your heart more than I hear the guns right now. And he really handles those guns so well. So every time you hear that gun move in the game and just the reloads and all that, that's Stuart's energy that he's putting into it to make it sound so good.
I love this photo because it's like a sense of glee. He's like genuinely really happy to hold that thing. Is that what was it? The MG42? Is that right?
That's an MG42. Yep. That's
okay.
It's a real piece of history.
I don't know if that's glee. I don't know if that's glee or is he just saying, I will f you up.
Yeah, that's glee.
The line that he says there, is MG42, except no substitute.
Oh man, that's fantastic. You know what? This is what I love about what you all are doing, because the passion that you have is really, really evident in the game, right? Because I mean, everything from the people modeling the actual guns in the game and just how good it looks in the game from a visual standpoint, but just the audio, the attention that you pay to the sound, it's evident that, you have to be into this, you care and want to sort of imbue that passion in all the work that you do in terms of sound. And I think it really shows really well. In fact, I mean, first off, I want to congratulate you guys. I mean, it was, I think in 2019 you won Best Audio Design for the Game Awards for Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I think I saw that.
That's correct. We won for the Game Awards. We won 2 MPSE awards, the Golden Reels. We've won
awesome
various other awards as well. I'm actually listening to this podcast that we're recording right now on a pair of Genelecs that we won from the video award. And a pair of Genelecs was the trophy. And it was super cool and super time appropriate.
Is it gold plated? Is it gold plated, silver plated? Like what? Bronzed?
Unfortunately not. I would absolutely rock those if they had something
blinged out. Oh man, that's awesome. But, congrats. I mean, you all are getting really some wonderful accolades for the hard work that you put in. So congrats to you all. That's awesome.
I got to ask one really way down in the weeds kind of question, but I have to ask because that's what I do. When you were catching those reflections, and I didn't get a chance to chime in then because I had to deal with a doggy issue, but when you catch that reflection, all right, so are you actually having to take that shot all the way through? Meaning, the gunshot, where it emanates, right? Where that sound bounces, and the reflected sound. Are you stitching those together, or does it depend on where the player is?
It does depend on where the player is, and those are different recordings from different times. The actual gunshots themselves are a totally different recording shoot, where we are capturing specifically just the weapon. The reflections are on its own. It's another, several recording trips. From Warner Brothers backlot, Florida, like Tim was saying, Big Bear, Palm Springs area, like we've been all over the place. And we are capturing in those instances just the reflection at different calibers with different types of weapons, not even necessarily weapons that are represented in the game. Because the whole point is to get a variety and range to match those up with the weapons in the game. Because we only have so much memory, and I think one full reflection set is like 200 sounds. So we have quite a lot of memory with just reflection. And those sounds, and we will capture them at different distances. So you have close reflection, the medium reflection, the far reflection, the distant reflection.
Wow. That's amazing.
Getting that all back together. When you're hearing it in the game, it's not a single reflection. You might be standing next to a wall and you'll hear it close here, but you might have nothing obstructing you downrange, and you'll hear a distant one. But there are many reflections and many rays that go out from the player, and they are directed downrange predominantly because that's where the energy of the shot is going.
Yeah, because what I noticed when Mike had sent me some footage, and I really paid attention to the sound, I actually closed my eyes. I wanted to see if there was a lot of repeated ambient noises, and it wasn't, at least not to my ear. Now, maybe something was slightly detuned, maybe panned a little bit. I don't know what it was, but used to be back in the old days when you played video games, you heard the same ambient noise. Oh, yeah, that reverb was the same thing I got when I dribbled the basketball on the other side of the floor, right? So, but in these, I noticed that the reflections all seem a little bit different or detuned, or something moves about them to where it never sounds repetitive or redundant.
That's right. The system is designed so that each shot is a unique snowflake. You should never hear the exact same shot again, ever.
That's amazing.
Because there are the distance of the shot, the change in the actual wave file that's playing back. There are other filtering parameters, pitch, and stuff that is also taking place. So every shot is unique.
I would also say the time delay based on speed of sound. So that provides a lot of variation in the game, because depending on where you're pointing, it is changing the delay time of that reflection back towards you. And so you don't get the same repeated stacking and the same repeated kind of rhythm to everything. It's constantly changing, and it provides depth in that regard.
Yeah, there's multiple.
That's incredible.
There's multiple sound files for each weapon class. So, we kind of have to think about it in power factor, where small caliber or smaller caliber pistols will have less energy than a really heavy weapon like a 50 BMG or something like that. So there's sets where there's different sounds for each slot, and then for those at different distances and whatnot. So the system that Tim and the coding team and just all these other people who aren't here today who have contributed immensely to all of this set it up in such a way that we can have that non-repetitive thing where it mimics reality, where you get the comb filtering and the sense of where the reflections hit, that gives the brain the cue, even if it's subtle and you can't necessarily articulate exactly where it's happening, but it gives the brain the cue that says where you are. Kind of like if you shout in a small room, and the way that the comb filtering enters your ears and your brain interprets it, it tells you how big that room is. And it's this kind of thing where trying to mimic that as much as we can with the tech and time and all the budget and all whatever, that we're trying to get there. And I think we did pretty well.
So Stuart, I got to ask Stuart this question because I think I heard this and I probably didn't. My brother, I have a HK93. He has an HK91. Right. So he's shooting 308s. I'm shooting 223s. We're side by side. For some reason, it sounded like his was louder than mine. Every single time he shot, it seemed like a cannon. Now I know that could have been proximity because he was about, 8 feet away from me, to my right. And, I just kept saying, damn, man, let's swap guns. He won't let me touch his, but is that, does it get that different between something as close in caliber as say a 308 versus a 223?
Yeah.
Is it that big of a difference?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. There's things you can do to make a 223 or a 5.56 rifle or pistol louder than a differently equipped 308, or at least you can even that out. But in general, if you have two firearms that are like that, an HK91 or an HK51, or one of these kind of large, a G3 based big 308 HK like that versus a 5.56 HK, if they're set up similarly, then the 308 is going to be an order of magnitude more concussion, more sound pressure level. Yeah,
I feel better about myself now.
But if you wanted to compete with them with a noise, you could put a wide multi-ported brake on that muzzle of your 93, and there's loudener muzzle devices that you can do to if you want to be obnoxious back.
It's like an exhaust.
Yeah, it is.
It's like an aftermarket exhaust for cars, right? Aftermarket exhaust. You can put an attachment to the muzzle. That's awesome.
You can make guns really, really obnoxious.
They have names like the Little Bastard.
Yep.
There's
one called
they had those in music too.
There's one called the LAF, and they I forget what they.
Loud as fuck.
That's what.
Oh, shit, we can cuss.
Don't hold back, man. Yeah, but Anthony, don't hold back, man. Just be yourself. You can say whatever you want.
What you wish for, brother.
Wow, that's really awesome. There's just, it's really amazing. Just, I was thinking back, cause you guys touched on memory a few times, I've noticed, cause I perk up to that because I was a game dev working back in the PS2 era, PS2 Xbox era. And if I recall, the PS2 had 2 megabytes of memory.
2 megabytes. And if you turned on reverb, you lost 500K of that or so.
Oh yeah,
you would have 1.41 megs left if you'd had the reverb on.
There you go.
That is burned into my head forever because I had to fit so many games into 1.41 megs.
Yeah, and then you had streaming buffers too. If you wanted to stream anything, you had to take it off of that too. So.
Isn't it so it's just freeing, right? Being able to we don't have all these technical constraints that we used to have back in the day. I remember having to downsample. If there was a sound that didn't have a lot of high frequencies, it was very low, we would sample at 8, kilohertz, right? Or less or whatever, just to maximize, to kind of get, use Nyquist theorem to kind of figure out, I could get away with this, right? And so now we don't have to deal with that anymore. But it's amazing, the fact that and so what Anthony was saying, which I realized, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Anthony, is that it really does sound unique and so natural. And it's just, you forget you're in a game because, games were sort of, I remember, I don't want to mention specific games, but I remember games in the early 2000s where it was so repetitive. Even the music cues were the same, even every single thing that, that you did, if it was a certain event, it just sounded the exact same time every time, very repetitive.
I'm going to say this real quick, and I'm not going to say a name either, but I remember playing a game back in the day when I played a lot of games and stuff, and you see these headshots, right? Guys getting shot in the head, boom. First of all, it takes this long. Boom, push. And then the guy goes, ah! I'm like, dude, if you get your brains blown out, you ain't going to be, ah! This is bullshit, man. Come on. Ah! Your brains are on the wall.
Oh man.
You get that with
great.
new actors a lot too, because they'll come in, they'll be like, "All right, you want headshots," and then they do something like that. You're like, "No, dude, you wouldn't be saying a thing."
Exactly.
You might just go, "Blah." Maybe, right?
Yeah, splat. Yeah.
Oh wow. It's things we don't think about, right? Until you actually have to think about them. Wow. That's
I'm never going to look at another old school Clint Eastwood Western again. You guys have ruined it. I thought all guns had massive reverb and ricochet noise.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? I rewatched recently, and I remember how it kind of was influential, at least back when I was a game dev working on some projects. Where you guys remember the movie Heat?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember the? I mean, it's kind of iconic, the scene, and I remember this was one of the first times that the gun sounds really stood out for me. Right, it was kind of a break of what I heard before, because there was, Val Kilmer and Robert De Niro had just robbed a bank, right, and they're out in the street and they're having a shootout with the police, and I just remember hearing like. I mean, you could tell that you were in the middle of a downtown area, right? Heavily populated urban area, and just the reflections and everything that really stood out to me. I had never heard anything like that before that movie. And it's amazing because I think you guys touched on it. Like there's certain things that come out in certain, movies or TV shows or things that come out that sort of inspire us, right? And make us think, oh, we can take this to another level, or we can take this to another level. And you guys are doing it in some ways for other, it's sort of like you are inspiring and you're also being inspired. And it's just this great feedback loop, I'm just wondering if there are any games that, any movies or anything you've seen that's sort of like you brought up Zero Dark 30, any sort of classic movies or anything that sort of inspire you from the gun sounds, from, the environments. I'm just wondering.
Well, you mentioned
there's always inspiration from different things.
You mentioned Heat.
Go ahead.
There's a long series of stories in Hollywood and sound about the post-production for that film. I won't get too deep into it, but let's just say that there was some big back and forths about the philosophy of approaching the guns and Heat, and some really fascinating kind of stories that go along with that movie. But Michael Mann, in the end, insisted on having as much live production sound because of exactly what you described, the realistic urban environment that you almost don't experience in films, because it's just so rare to get the opportunity to record scenes like that with real full power blanks. And the way that they were able to do that film wasn't something that was that common. But the uniqueness and the reality and the feel and the fear that the sound of those weapons in the streets, the way they were, was so powerful to Michael Mann that he rejected different approaches of traditional kind of post-production sound design for those guns, even though they were done by really the top of the top sound designers. So they would go back and forth between, squirting in additions to those real recordings, and then just going with only the real recordings. I don't know enough of I don't recall enough of the stories, but it was a big deal at the time. Some unhappy people, a lot of wasted work, but Michael Mann had a vision for what he wanted that movie to sound like, and that was how it kind of ended up.
It came through.
I remember watching one that just was the dumbest, most exaggerated gun sounds I ever heard in my life. And it was almost laughable sometimes, was the second 48 hours. I'm like, these dudes are pulling out like Glock 19 and it's going, whoa. I was tripping out, but I think the one that did it for me, and I'm not that I'm an expert on hearing guns in the midst of a war, but there was something different when I saw Full Metal Jacket. And I'm not saying they did what you guys, that technology probably didn't even exist yet, but it seemed it's something about the hits. You know, when there was a hit, you went, oh my God. Whereas in, 48 hours, like, yeah, shoot his ass, and you look at that and something felt way more real. A guy getting hit in the stomach and actually something does come out other than that little drop of blood and you hold it with one finger, that dumb shit. So it was really cool, not cool, but it was really different to see some of those things happen in Full Metal Jacket. And it felt a lot more real, and you all of a sudden took guns more serious. It wasn't like, yeah, shit, I'm going to go out and, shoot guys with this 44. They'll get up and walk away,
That's exactly right, Anthony, because then you get a sense of just the visceral, nature of these guns, because, it's that power of the gun that comes through.
Real,
and it almost like shocks you, it scares you. I mean, my mouth was open. Like I was, just like listening to those guns in heat, right? I was like, oh my God. I mean, they literally are terrifying, right? And then, in Full Metal Jacket and others, you see examples of like when the sounds of the weapons are really portrayed just as they are in real life.
Well, the thing about
it scares you, it's really jarring.
And the thing about Full Metal Jacket that was weird to me, and I granted, I'm not saying nobody knows what this really sounds like, because if they did, they'd be dead. But when you hear the impact the other direction, you don't hear the shot, but it's just a guy talking. What about shoot? Granted, it's not going to sound like, but there was something about it coming and him not knowing it was coming. And then half his head is gone. It was just stuff like that is like made me really take the weapons I have in my house more serious. This ain't a game. I mean, you're getting ready to use one of these things. You have to be.
And there are
prepared.
those moments in Call of Duty, like even with this game, with Modern Warfare or with Warzone, you get a sense of like, at any moment you can get shot. Right. And you're always on edge. I mean, there have been moments in the game where I played, and even in some of the footage you've all provided, where it's like, oh my God, it's just really stark examples of like, here's your teammate right next to you telling you to do something. And then boom, he's on the floor. It's like, holy cow, and that came out of nowhere.
I knew it looked real when my girlfriend looked at him and like, oh my God, that's gory. I'm like, okay, it must be right. When she said that, I'm like, damn.
Yeah, that really comes through it really comes through in what you guys have done.
Well, we can take a look at the video of the impacts, because we actually did record, guns impacting different objects and stuff. I think it's right after the Foley. That there's a impact shoot. Yeah.
So let me go ahead and play that. In the other video, which I'm going to play, there's a scene where you're in a car or van or a truck actually, and you're reversing and you're getting shot at, and you can tell that those sounds that you just captured for impacts are like, wow, it just sounds like it just sounds so realistic.
Yeah, we had to put microphones inside the car, and there was a casualty, a couple stands. What else, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was a Audio Technica 4022, I think. It was the.
Oh, I thought it was the 825 or whatever.
It deserved to die.
It took one for the team.
That was its calling.
It took one for the team. It did.
Yeah, exactly.
But Tim, you should
mouthing off to the director.
Tim, you should talk about the supersonic cracks and things like that if you want to, because you had so.
Oh, I was going to talk. I was going to talk about the impacts a little bit more, and like you guys were starting to talk about this safety or the being cautious of like how powerful the weapons are. As a non-gun guy, I just want to say how safe these gun shoots were. Nobody is like hoorah about we're going to go out and shoot some stuff. we have safety briefings every morning when we're out there. Only the armorers are firing and handling the weapons. People like Larry and Stu, who are really educated into these weapons, they're so welcoming and kind and generous with their time and educating others and teaching us about the weapons and teaching us to be safe, how to handle things, telling you, like, here's the firing line. Everybody's behind here at all times. You have to ask permission if you need to go adjust
and point them if you are handling them right a certain way.
Yes, point.
Yeah,
exactly. We all know when the range is live and when it's not. There's one man with one person with a bullhorn who runs the shoot and lets everybody know when we're rolling, when we're not, if you can move, if there's a live weapon or not. Like everything's really safely contained and a pleasure to work with. That said, we're doing these impact shots, and it's the whole thing is, we're going to try to get ricochets. We're going to try to hit this thing, and we're a couple, we're 50 yards, 100 yards away from where we're shooting things. But it's like, okay, we're going to get windows, and Larry's great. He's just like, okay, what do you want me to hit next? Knock out the front lights of the car, knock out. Now you're going to get some body shots. Now get some windows. And let's try to get some ricochets off the wheels. Like, okay. And he gets a few. They're like, ping, ping. And all of a sudden he gets a ricochet that flies back towards all of us recording. And you hear it just, and it goes right overhead. Yeah. And one
Please
of us,
tell me you had a mic on.
Not one of us, somebody who's oh yeah, we got lots of bullet movements from these things. We got some really great ricochets, but when we knew it was somebody who wasn't recording, somebody who was just there supporting the team, and he just got up and ran over a ridge and was just like, I'm out. that came right by me. And we had to talk. We were like, hey, we're all being safe. That was not going to hurt anybody. We're all.
Were you
fine.
Behind something? But did you have something between you and the?
No, we have.
Air.
Oh yeah, I would have left too.
That's
I'd have been.
Yeah.
And here we are.
See y'all.
What was it? Was it the King Kong movie where the sound guy gets killed? So we're all a bunch of sound people out there.
You're talking about in the
film. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's of course the sound guy who gets it.
Of course.
So here we are. It's a bunch of sound people out there waiting to catch him around. But no,
thought you guys were going to tell me you had some big bulletproof shields out there in front of you. There's nothing there. Hell yeah, I would have left.
Nope, nothing more. We haven't even gotten to the either.
I'll be sitting in the bulletproof bus out back.
Wow. Yeah, no, all in the name of art. That's amazing. I mean, accidents, it does happen, but it's good to know that you all were taking safe precautions. But, accidents can happen, right? I mean, things, do happen. I remember one time I've been on a shoot and we were shooting a 50 cal Ma Deuce, actually an M2, on the side of a hill. We were shooting at the side of a hill. This was in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was part of a gun club, and I was actually there on a recording session. We were trying to record gun sounds, and the rounds were actually so we're shooting live rounds at the side of a mountain, and they were actually bouncing over the hill, and there was another group of people that were shooting, right, and they were actually seeing basically the shells landing, right. I'm sorry, not the shells, but the rounds are basically jumping and going over the hill. And we basically got a sheriff come and say, hey, what's going on here? And we kind of explained what we were doing. And he was like, okay, carry on, but you're freaking out the people next to you. And we're like, oh, crap. So we ended up, basically putting that away and shooting other things.
Where the hell was this at? Definitely wasn't in Seattle.
Scottsdale, it was Scottsdale, Arizona. Yeah,
okay, that makes sense.
Out in the desert in Arizona, yeah.
It's usually or Nevada. We've definitely had, over the years and all the recordings that we've done for Call of Duty, all kinds of interesting things. For Modern Warfare 2, we had one recording session down on Boulevard, California. It's literally on the California-Mexico border. And we had to hire security, and they were all retired military snipers. To make sure, because we had all of these weapons, all of this ammunition, and we're literally firing towards a ridge on the border. So every once in a while, you'd meet the guys in the morning, and we'd go out, and you'd never see them again until nighttime. And occasionally they'd radio in, okay, there's somebody coming, whether somebody's crossing a border or there's, military, and we'd have to stop, and they'd let us know when it was clear, and we'd continue. I've also been on live fire exercises at Camp Pendleton and out with the Marines. Recorded an M1 Abrams tank live fire with the Marines. I mean, you'll also get to see helicopters and jets and all kinds of things. Like Call of Duty's been really good to us as sound people because it's given us opportunities and access to things that are not easy to come by.
Yeah, I mean, just name drop. Hey, I work for Call of Duty. Yeah, come on in. I'd be happy to help you guys out. I mean, it's like, what do you want? You want a tank? I mean, literally, right? An M1 Abrams. Damn. Wow. That's amazing, man. That's amazing. It's funny. Maybe we can segue to vehicles because I kind of want to. Is that okay with y'all? Fast forward here to some of these, and I want to get to explosions in a bit because that's fascinating too. Oh, there we go. I remember this emblem. So that's amazing. We're gonna have to talk about that later. But so vehicles. I've worked on vehicle games myself where we've recorded vehicles. It was sort of like early on in my career. I worked on a couple of racing games, and so I have a particular passion for recording vehicles and also like what it takes to integrate vehicle sounds into a game and what you have to do to make them sound realistic. So I would love to touch on that with you all. So let's go ahead and play this video and you guys can talk about it a bit.
Wow. Oh, shit. What the hell was that there? Oh,
what?
They were standing on the damn runway. Crazy bastards. God.
How do you expect us to get sounds on a jet?
Yeah,
That is nuts.
yeah. There was a couple times where there was some of us at the end of the runway, and the jet's going over that low, and then they have to bank in order to start to turn. And as the wing dips, and you have to be on your toes.
You ain't lying, man.
I was talking to that pilot to tell him, what we wanted to do and just give him a briefing. But, on the phone, I was talking to him about a week before we did that shoot. And just saying, we're going to do pass-bys and we want you to do some circling. And we will, when you're doing the pass-bys, we'll start at, 100 feet up and then 50. And how low are you comfortable with flying? How low can we get you? And he said, well, I've cut cactuses in half before.
Oh, man. Don't do that.
Okay. You're probably taller than that cactus, so watch out.
I mean, look, I can't believe, I know it must have been exciting and exhilarating to have a plane fly over you that way, but at any point were you like, this is, why am I doing this? Like, or was there sort of like,
It's always a moment where you're scared as hell.
Yeah. I think the first two pass-bys, I actually had to duck. And then I was like, okay, I know I don't have to duck anymore. I can just,
Oh, I see. So you cut the ducking parts out because you're like, okay, this is me. Yeah. I mean, guys, that's incredible. I've never seen anything like that. That's
I think it was Chris Staples. He's another great sound designer who's not here. He's worked on a ton of Call of Duties, but he's kind of like the guinea pig at field recording sessions a lot of times. Like he's the guy who ends up wearing a bucket on his head at explosion shoots and stuff like that.
Wow.
And which we can talk about later. But I think he was the one on the far end of the the runway, and so the plane's coming in low, and he's the first one that you see, and it looks like it's going to hit him. And once it clears Staples, it's like, okay, the rest of us are okay. If it didn't hit Staples, we're fine.
There's definitely that acceptance of it, right? Where you have to just kind of go with it, and you can't express your fear or your anything. You have to just keep quiet and move your mic and just stay on the ball. So there's that sort of discipline that comes with the acceptance, and I love that about it.
The still picture of the girl with pointing her microphone up and it's passing right over her, that's Chrissy, and she was just a rock during that day.
Oh,
She's
that's Chrissy?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's Chrissy right there. Yeah.
Shorter than the rest of us. She knew that if it didn't hit us, she was safe.
She's also smart.
Yes, she is.
She is. Yeah. She sure is.
Awesome.
That is incredible. Okay, what kind of plane is that?
That is a Fuga Magister. And we actually chose this, one, because of the access that we were able to get rather inexpensively. But also because when you get into a modern jet and you get into supersonic stuff, it's just too much noise. And particularly if it has a lot of character to it. So it made the recordings that we got from it super flexible, and we could use it for all kinds of things.
Oh, okay. I see. Really interesting. Okay. Wow. It's mind boggling to me. That shot is just, wow. That's incredible. Now, as far as I've noticed with the helicopter, was that a Little Bird?
Yeah.
That's a Little Bird. Yeah. Those are cool. I don't know. Have you all ever been in, I'm sure, where you had opportunities to ride in them to get sounds?
Never actually ridden in one. We've been able to mic up a variety of helicopters over time.
Okay.
I think one of the fun ones was actually me and a couple of other people working with John Fasell, and we were wiring up an Apache helicopter.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We got to put portable rigs inside of it, and then it went off and flew its mission for a few hours and came back. Those were great interior source. I've probably got pictures somewhere of John and I with microphones with the helicopter, with the Apache about 25 feet above our heads.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, there's so much material that we can share, whether it's still photos or video. We try to give you just some of the fun, most recent stuff.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's. I appreciate that. Well, I'm going to get now getting into sort of integration, if you don't mind, because this is something I'm interested in personally. Did you all use proprietary integration? For example, I know back in the day, we used to do a lot of pitch shifting, right? We would record, for example, a truck or a car or something like that, record them at different RPMs, and then kind of blend between the different RPMs by pitch shifting. Are you doing something similar? Are you using different tools? Are you using engine modeling? I'm just wondering what you're doing now using today's technology to make really good, realistic, dynamic vehicle sound natural.
There are multiple answers to that. We'll start with the first one, and we'll start with the Little Bird, since you can actually fly it and have it, buzz you when you're in Warzone. So Tim can talk about that.
Okay.
The Little Bird is completely proprietary and unique to all the other vehicles because it's its own thing. It flies differently than the rest of the vehicles in the game, and the ground vehicles. So there's startup and shutdown one-shots that are recorded from the session out here, and they're put in the game cinematically. Like the shutdown sequence, I think, is like a full minute shutdown. And I've never seen anybody do this in the game, but in Warzone, you can shut down a Little Bird and sit there for a minute and listen to the engine spool down the whole time.
Wow.
So it starts up when you jump in it, and then there's different loops for, it's all loop-based, RPMs for how much you're pushing the throttle of the Little Bird. So as it's pushing up in the air, as it's going forward and backward. And we have completely separate sounds for the main rotor and the tail rotor. So as you're turning, the tail rotor is going to be spooling up and down, playing different RPMs. As you're going up and down, the main rotor is pushing or pulling. But all the sounds that are in there for the Little Bird are straight off of this recording session. It's the real thing, and it dropped into the game pretty seamlessly.
Wow.
The pilot that we had was great, and we could just say like, okay, yeah, we just want you to hover. Now just give me ups and downs. Now just go left and right. Now spin in place. And the recording session went by really quickly because we were just like, okay, we got all of the basic actions, and now we just take that exact same thing and put it in the game.
It's phenomenal. I mean, it sounds so. I've been in one. Actually, guys, I highly recommend if you ever get a chance, next time you do a shoot or something, it's like, hey, can I get in? If you get that waiver from work, because it's incredible. It's like all of a sudden you're on the ground. Next thing you know, you're really high up in the air, and it's and the form factor of the Little Bird is such. It's like you feel like you're in a race car in a way, just going up. It's hard to describe. It's like, it's so cool. I've also been in Super Hueys, but the Little Bird is unique in that regard. It just felt like it was just the coolest feeling. The sound is really, really good. So now you talk about the Little Birds, how you modeled the Little Bird in the game. Now, are the other sounds more physics-based in terms of how you model them, in terms of like engine, as you know, it starts from idle all the way up to engine, highest engine revs. Is that physics-based? I'm just wondering.
Now, for all of the wheeled vehicles, there are multiple systems that are in place. So the engine itself, we actually licensed and worked with Rev.
Oh, okay, Rev. Okay. Got it.
Which has become pretty popular. And then worked with Adam Boyd and Brian Watkins to actually record vehicles that were made specifically for it. And that covered just the engines. We've got different services for tire sounds. We have suspension and a variety of other things going on. And Tim can delve into the rest of that as well.
For every vehicle, there's the engine that's in Rev. And then we have... Man, I'm going to try to think of all the different systems that are there. There's horns, impacts, doors, tires. The tires have surface sounds for movement, and then skidding, peeling out, braking. There's brake sounds. There's there's some stuff that hasn't even shipped yet, but I don't know if it's ever going
damage too, right? Damage.
But that's comprehensive, man.
There's damage, so your engine gets damaged. It plays one-off sounds and then loop sounds for damaged states. And
all these tie in with the physics engine, right, in the game, so that it's basically
our vehicle programmer Manu. He's a genius and like single-handedly did all the vehicle coding this game, and He was tying in things like we'd go to him and say, hey, this doesn't feel right. When I do a jump in this ATV, like the RPMs are staying the same. And he's like, well, the wheels, they should spin more. And like, yep. And so then he would handle it. So you get that pulling uphill as you're going up a ramp, and then you jump and the engine does that, and the RPMs spike up. And then, when you land after that jump, you get the suspension sound of the suspension compressing. Your tires go to the side, and you get the skidding sounds. And all of those. I don't know. Live in game while it's playing, you can be driving a vehicle and be taking up like 10, 12 voices just with the vehicle easily.
That's just the one vehicle. If there are other vehicles, then and proximity. Wow, that's amazing.
And 150 people, and gunshots, and explosions, and everything else to go along with it.
Right.
Yeah. The vehicles are a little bit dumbed down, the third person versus the first person. So if you're driving a vehicle, you have a little bit more detailed sound than when you hear something else coming at you. And then something we talked about before was memory. all of the vehicle sounds are loaded transiently. They're loaded on the fly while you're playing the game. So we don't have the space to have all of that all the time.
Right.
But I go and I jump in a Jeep, boom, my Jeep sounds load up. And so that's how we can have such detailed sound, and the engine and all the tires and then horns and everything like that. We can have all that detail because it doesn't have to be there constantly.
Yeah. Quick question on the anything with motors. I did some multi-miking. I did a video called Cars a few years back. And it was like a shitload of exotics, right? Running down this airfield with helicopters flying and all this stuff. And I remember when I was multi-miking car motors or in the car that's passing, right? So somebody's going 100 miles an hour. We got mics hanging out the window. We got mics over here, mics over there. When I got in post, I had a lot of phasing issues. So what I found myself doing was I would take the say, somebody's wide open, say 6 gear, and I would take that and I'd take the inside recording and I'd have to take one and detune it. Because if I didn't, I'd have massive phase issues. So when I check the mix in mono, the motor sounds would be gone completely. Right. So did you guys experience some of that same stuff when you're recording things that are, long sustained, like motors and things of that sort?
Stuart can probably talk a lot about that, but I think it's not just an engine thing. When you have that many mics in close proximity to each other, you're going to hit phase.
Even with the guns, like we saw in those photos with all the mics.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Had to manually line them up afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm editing gun sounds, I'm going down to the sample. I'm looking at it from as zoomed in as you possibly can, and at least with the guns, I can't speak to the vehicle stuff per se. I definitely have run into some of that, but in terms of that, the guns, I'll make really tiny offsets, and that's where I think a lot of the creativity part comes in, is sort of choosing mic angles that are your anchor. Anthony, you mentioned before about mono compatibility, and that mono is the most powerful sound that you have in your arsenal. And it's about how do you make choices about what's going to be mono, and then add on the ambience to that in a way that stays collapsible in terms of the phase, and you kind of stay out of your own way. So a lot of times, without going too deep into it, we're doing a lot of tricks to maintain something that can be folded down and still retain all the power and as much of the sort of ambient effects as possible. But it's absolutely something that comes up, especially with the systems like Tim was describing before, how as a 3D object gets further away and the sound starts to collapse, if that sound doesn't have a mono element that tells the story of what that thing is, then you're going to lose it. And so a lot of our mentality is about making things with anchors that are in mono, and then having the stereo aspect of it be the sauce. That's the flavoring, but making sure the whole story can be told with the anchors.
Now that's very interesting, because I was going to ask you too. It sounds like you do something similar, because I've never recorded, obviously, live gunfire. But if I would in post, I would think that what I would do is take the initial attack and probably select the mono track and let that be the dominant initially. I mean, for that whatever milliseconds it is, and then introduce that stereo width on the reflections and the surrounding noises. Or am I kind of on that? Or?
You're tuned in pretty good on that one, I would say, Anthony. Yeah, you. Yeah.
Oh, I read your book.
Without going too much into it, yeah, you know what you're talking about on that.
It's decades of recording drums and everything. Because I mean, as you guys said earlier, I mean, the difference between a gun and a drum. I mean, obviously there's SPL differences, but it's the same concept. It's a sharp transient. So yeah, it applies, man. That applies 100%.
You're right on the ball, Anthony, with that. We have certain aspects of whether it be a weapon or an explosion that is in mono. And we have other sweetener sounds, other layers. Nothing plays back as a single sound in the game. Everything is stacked in layers. And to add the perspective changes and We even manipulate some of that stuff in the game depending on what you're doing. If the gun is at your hip, you're getting a completely different perspective, and in some cases, different content than you are if you're ADS, which is aim down the sights. And there's a lot of detail that goes into making sure that those things work, and you can switch back and forth as many times as you want. It has to work in every case. And I think by the time we've kind of started wrapping up some of our seasonal content, we're at 70 weapons in the game.
Oh my
so there's a lot of recording, a lot of sound design, a lot of setup and memory optimizations that are constantly going on.
I got asked a corny question that everybody on my side of the fence is gonna want to know. Okay, each one of you guys, DAW of choice.
Pro Tools.
Okay, I don't feel so bad now. when I say that around anybody under 30, they're like, dude, Pro Tools sucks.
None of us were under 30.
Yeah. Well, in terms of, we have to interchange with people who are Hollywood professionals. We're working with guys in the industry that are at the top of their game, and the standard platform is Pro Tools. It's the most repeatable, the most exchangeable. We'll all have our little tricks and other applications that we'll work in to create content. But, it ends up in Pro Tools by and large because it just makes a lot of sense. And, there are some guys on the team, like Doug, he loves Reaper, but, there's going to be times when he's going to be in Pro Tools too. And everybody's kind of an independent thinker. So they're going to come up with ways of achieving the target, making the objective, and it might not have anything to do with Pro Tools, but it'll probably end up there. And especially so if they're going to be sending that session to someone else or receiving sessions and then modifying those and maybe moving those to someone else, it just makes sense. I mean, Avid could definitely improve Pro Tools, but it's...
Yeah, I always tell people I'm not married to these bastards, but they're a dedicated girlfriend of mine, I guess. Because I went HDX, and I had a buddy of mine try to sell me on Apollo, right, Universal Audio stuff, and I fell in love with it initially, and then I realized these satellites are exactly what I get on an HDX card, so it was kind of the same system. So I donated that to a friend of mine that runs a charity, and I'm still here. I am with my old man Pro Tools.
Yep.
We all work on PCs and Macs, and so we got our Pro Tools rigs on the Mac, and the game development side is on PC, and that kind of lets us. One, if your machine is like your PC is bogged down building the game, it's in a 2-hour compile or something, you can still work in Pro Tools, and it's also kind of a division between I'm doing something creative, I'm doing something technical, and you can you kind of split your brain that way a little bit. I use Reaper sometimes on PC too. If it's just I need to line up a couple of sounds really quick or make a quick edit to something, it just makes sense to do it on the same platform that I'm developing on. But it's mostly Pro Tools.
No, I was just going to say, I have this thing where I get a lot of people that give me a lot of feedback on different DAWs. And I always tell people, for music, whatever you're used to or whatever looks right to your eyes or feels right ergonomically, you look at something and be like, okay, I can move that and I can edit that really quick. I watched a buddy of mine work in Ableton. I said, dude, if you ever go off of Ableton, I'll shoot you in the back of the fucking head. I mean, dude, he was so fast in Ableton. I'm like, just stay there. But you're right. When you start, because I do a lot of things where I did a Pepsi ad I produced. I did this bot ad that's out. I'm doing ads for people like Target and stuff like that. They're all going to be on Pro Tools. And if you're not compatible, you got to get there, right? So that's why I stuck with it.
Yeah, we have a lot of generation that'll take place in other things, whether it be Reaper or using plug-in change through SoundMiner, FL Studio, SoundForge. There's other creation and things that'll go on to get kind of the sound elements that you want. But in the end, everything ends up in Pro Tools for us to finish, have all the editing done. It's mixed in a certain way, and before those assets actually go in the game.
Now, I'm dying to ask this question, and it may be already known, but what sound engine are you using? Are you using proprietary sound engine, or using the middleware out there like Wise or Fmod? I'm just wondering.
Call of Duty is completely proprietary.
Oh, okay, interesting.
It gives us flexibility rather than being tied to working with somebody else's engine where we're asking for features to be added. Okay. In this case, we can go directly to our programs and go, we want this, and it needs to be super efficient, running at 60 frames a second. And now with Warzone, 150 player count in a big map that is constantly streaming, whether it's sound, geo, or other art.
Wow.
Everything has to be super efficient, and none of us, whether it be artists, animators, audio folk, we're not willing to bend on quality. So we highly rely upon our coding team to deliver incredible things for us, to allow us to be as expressive as artists as we can be.
So there's the engine side of things, and then there's the tool set that has to integrate, right? So that you all can interact with the interactive engine. So you have proprietary tools, I would imagine, as well, that allow you to integrate vehicle sounds and guns and all kinds of things. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, all of that. And
yeah,
even for us, like if we want, like, I don't like where this button is in the sound tool, well, we could just ask to have it.
Exactly. That's nice. I want it up here, so down here. Interesting. Okay. And you have now this is a question that came up with some players that I've talked to that were like, I kind of told them ahead of time, hey, I'm talking to folks who develop Call of Duty. Really? That's awesome. Can you ask them about footsteps? So I've been getting that a lot, right? Because, what is it, the thing that gamers, I mean, I've seen YouTube channel after YouTube channel, or I'm sorry, video on YouTube about footsteps. And hey, here's the secret to making, your footsteps. Anyway, so if y'all don't mind talking a little bit about what went into the development of your footstep, engine, if you will, or your footstep integration.
You will ask any first-person shooter player, the one thing that they care to hear most over anything is footsteps. Right. And there's an awful lot of game feedback as far as what to be aware of, what there's movement around you, what direction it's in, how far away is it, and that primarily comes from footsteps. And I mean, you're never going to make everybody happy, whether it's the designers, the audio folk, or the players. Like, you try to please as many people as you can, and even to this date, I mean, we still make tweaks to the game to try and fix issues. We found at times where a new animation was added that we didn't know about. It had no note tracks.
Wow. That's disconcerting. Wow.
Well, that's the nice thing about a live game is you can fix those things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we're used to working in a Call of Duty where you've got your core multiplayer and there's not a lot of verticality. There might be one or two floors or something like that. And you're talking about 12 to 20 people depending on the game mode. And there's a lot you can get away with there. Now you add in Warzone, which really became a big thing for us about halfway through our production. And we all dug deep and like, this is going to be a hell of a roller coaster ride for us, because now you're talking like 150 players, you're talking 2 square miles of area that you can cover. You're talking 20-story buildings down to a wooden shack. And then we have to get as creative as we can, making sure that every surface is accounted for. So if a designer happens to put a puddle just outside a door and you hear that change in tonality with the footsteps as it hits the puddle, you're like, I know where that person is.
Exactly.
And for the very aware player who pays attention to those things and knows what's around them, they can actually start shooting before that person comes into view because they know they're coming.
Right.
Quick question too. How often do you guys, I got to ask you about monitoring. I heard somebody mention Genelex earlier. I know you guys spend a lot of time sitting in, surround type speaker setups, but how often do you reference your stuff with headphones? Because that's how most people play, right? So.
Yeah, that's a really important factor for us. And when we do play test, this is of course when we were in the office. We're all work from home right now. We have 50 PlayStations set up on one floor, and there's probably another 30 set up on another floor, all with headphones, many with different types of headphones. So we constantly do our play tests listening that way, but sometimes we will work from our offices. Sometimes we will listen through a TV. Sometimes it's our big surround system. Other times we put it on kind of our shitty little stereo speakers. Always got to check multiple sources, just like if you're mixing music. So we're constantly listening to different things. And we do get, right before shipping, we do take-home play tests as well. So we get to listen in a home environment so that we can make further tweaks, whether that be on a sound bar or, I personally have the reflecting style Dolby Atmos setup in my living room, that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
Very
so
cool.
Always having to listen to different things. And we provide presets in the game that actually allows you to change the compressor and change the mix and EQ. So you've got all kinds of little things that you can do to customize it for your personal listening environment and your personal taste.
I've had some massive arguments with other engineers who will tell you in the studio you should never listen on headphones. And my thing is, I believe in replicating the end user's environment as much as possible, right?
Totally.
My end user is not going to be sitting here with, two nice speakers sitting off axis about, 3 feet away from me, perfectly angled in. That's not going to happen. So I always reference computer speakers, whatever they listen to music on. So I'm glad to hear you try to replicate the end user's environment, because that's what's going to sell you right there, I believe.
Yeah, it's super important.
We'll check stuff on just monitor speakers, like a little tiny TV, and just, hey, Stu just dumped a new weapon in. Let's check out what it sounds like on this. And, does it lose all of its low end? Can you still tell that it's big? And, we're always checking on, lowest common denominator.
That's where harmonics help.
What does the game sound like when you drop it to mono?
You always go to the car, right? And you always do the car check with your mix.
Mm-hmm.
If we could plug a PlayStation into our car, we'd probably test it there too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we try multiple environments.
It could be coming, with the self-driving car. They need something to do, right? So,
Minivan. If you got kids, you get a minivan full of kids. You got, you got screens in the back now. So
yeah, I know for us, we would, especially in the early days of hip hop, the 808 kick drum is kind of like, it's a staple, right? But you can't hear it in small speakers. And we kept trying to figure out, damn, hip hop sounds like shit in small speakers. And we started adding harmonics to the 808, so that turned into boom, So even though people that like music, jazz, they hated it, but fuck them. We didn't care about them because we were kids and we were trying to rebel against them, right? So so it's good to know that you do that, because that's probably why people are so crazy about your work, is because it sounds good everywhere.
Yeah, that's the goal.
I like to work on smalls when I'm creating, a sound or something for, a scene, sound design wise. I like to work on smalls first and then check it on the bigs. That's just a way that I've kind of worked. I'm familiar with my bigs enough to know how it translates back down too, so I can go bi-directional if I need to. But really getting that tonality and everything on the smalls is super, super important.
You get more detail on the smalls, and your ears don't get fatigued as quick.
Yes.
Smalls.
Yes.
Yeah, and if it sounds big on a smaller system, then it's going to work, or you have a better chance of it really being what you want. And we also, are familiar and conform to film sound standardizations in order to kind of go. I mean, we don't do it exactly like they do for feature films, but we're adhering to similar sort of protocols about calibration of our speakers, being aware of our sound pressure level, playback volumes, and things like that, in order to, like, if one person working on the team is monitoring at 50 dB reference and another person's monitoring at 85, they're going to come up with completely different materials. So in order to even things out, we try to use technology to calibrate our rooms, both in terms of frequency and phase response, and then also SPL level. And then from there, we'll venture out into small speakers that might not be calibrated, TVs and just any other kind of reference as a way of, tightening up that thing. And you'll discover stuff with all kinds of different playback mediums.
So I want to touch on a couple of things. Now that sort of we're in the situation with COVID, and you're all working in different environments, not studio environments or some of the facilities that you're used to at your headquarters at Infinity Ward. What are you doing now to sort of mitigate those issues in terms of your actual environment that you're using? Because it sounds like you're mixing from home and making sound judgments, if you will, in your home setup. So maybe talk a little bit about that, guys, and maybe each one of you sort of talk about, maybe starting with Steven, how you're managing that.
I do a lot of comparison back to work that we did that I'm really familiar with for the game that's already come out as we're adding content. Even if we're doing new ambiences and I'm checking out work from one of the other sound designers, whether it be Chris or Doug, and I will always load up a map that we shipped with and listen both on monitors, headphones, with different mix presets. It's a little more laborious as opposed to having to make sure your ears are kind of calibrated to what it was and then check the new content. Oftentimes, and this is the case with pretty much every sound designer, we're usually just turning things down. Everybody loves to hear their stuff. So.
That's true. More cowbell.
We should.
I've got a fever.
Natalia, can you do your whole COVID?
Yeah, I can.
Can you do your COVID system?
I'll show you guys
section?
my COVID setup. For as far as mixing and editing, for me personally, I've used these Sony MDR 7506 headphones for 15 years. So I know exactly what these headphones sound like. And if I can make it sound good in here and I know how it sounds in these, again, it's knowing your ears, then I know it's going to sound good everywhere. But for actors during COVID, it's been really hard because we've had to ship 4 cinematics and 3 operators per season. So we did an extra 12 operators all while we've been working from home. So let me pull this up. I got a Sound Devices recorder. The new ones they have, it's the MixPre. This is just the MixPre 3. But we ended up taking this, and I got some DPA mics that they just came out with. Oh yeah, you got the MixPre 6.
So they've shipped you one of them.
Yeah. And these are the headphones we actually send to the actors, and I send 2 of them. They're the DPA 4099s. And we used it on our mocap stage. You can see it on the actors. And DPA just came out with a new version called the 4097. I think it's because I sent them a bunch of pictures from our performance capture.
Oh, I see. So this is a kit that you send to the actors.
Yeah, it's an actual Pelican kit that we made right 2 weeks after. And we send them this. They strap it onto their headphone.
Oh, wow.
And then I can have them on camera. And this is a miniature shotgun mic. And so I get the exact spot I need for the actors. And they don't have treated rooms, but it's going to limit it down to as much as possible. The recorder is 32-bit. So I don't have to worry about them writing levels at all. They can focus on their acting. And we'll get the 32-bit files back, and I'll fix any clipping, or if it's way too low, you can fix that later. And it's ended up sounding spectacular. It's changed my entire way of editing. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's game-changing.
And are you having to deal with different environments? So like room noise and things like that for every actor? Like, I mean,
every actor is different. And so I usually call them. I'll talk to them for 15 minutes before we have the kit set up so they can turn it in and put it on within about 5 minutes. And then I'll walk through their room with them. I'll be like, all right, show me what's going on in the room. Okay. Let's set up a blanket right here. Just open your closet door and speak into your clothes. And that works great. And then
you doing
there
this
was one
like Zoom or something? You're walking through. Oh, wow. So you're using Zoom to kind of walk through and kind of get a sense of the space. That's cool.
Yeah. So I get a sense of
each
space.
person tracking their own sound, right?
Yeah. They just have to hit record on the recorders though. And then they send us back the recorders and I have exactly what I need.
That is insane.
Another actor was in a conference room and I was like, dude, this sounds way too echoey. Can you go grab every cushion from every couch in that place you're in? And so I had him build a fort out of couch cushions. And he just sat inside there and we did hundreds, thousands of lines that way with him.
I used to, funny, when I first got started, I didn't have any money. I'd had these 2 mic stands and I'd put, 4 of them. They were just shitty mic stands, rusted. I put 1 here. 2 here, 2 there, and then I take a old wool blanket and put it over all of that, and then I'd sit down and do my vocals like this, and everybody's like, "Damn, that sound booth sounds amazing." I'm like, yeah, that's the ghetto sound booth, baby.
We've all done it.
Whatever works.
We still do that now. Moving blankets are, one of the best tools you can have.
Yes.
We recorded a lot of weapon Foley that way out in the field. We had to go to Texas, and we had a rainy day, and so we found an inside space and put some blankets up and did weapon Foley.
Wow!
So
you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes you got to like just literally. I mean, just come up. You're put in a situation. You got to think on your feet, man. Just like make it happen.
Yeah.
I used to do radio. I had a radio show just a couple of years ago. I was doing everything in hotel rooms, so I'd have a miniature Pro Tools system, and every day no hotels are alike, or even the same chain. They're different. So I'm sitting in these big hollow, especially when you get into big cities, they like to do the millennial look, like the hollow, open hardwood floors. Oh my God, man! Just taking sheets off the bed, throwing them over my head, trying not to move. I'm glad, if a maid had walked in on me, they'd have thrown my black ass out quick. He was doing something under that sheet that didn't look right.
His head was shaking. We didn't know what was going on.
Which head?
The system that Dave Natale came up with to do that has become really influential throughout our entire company, Activision, and maybe even further out. I don't know, but Dave is super talented in many ways. On top of all this stuff, but also he's out there printing 3D printing microphone holders. So, in order to create the perfect setup, this is
the best one. He actually came up with his own proprietary way of for us to record gas masks.
You just get the standard gas mask, right? But I took just I 3D printed this part that would screw onto it. And then the actors could put this on and you get that gas mask on, and I'd put the lav right in here.
No way.
But I found I first used an elbow, but I found that the wind was pushing too much into the lav. And so I used a T so the air could still escape, but not push all that wind into the lav and not create all that unneeded energy.
Man,
that's incredible, man.
Whatever you guys get paid, it's way too low. I'm sorry.
You're recording it, right?
Yeah, it's recorded.
recording.
Way too low, man.
Man, but it's that passion again.
So yeah, it's just thinking outside the box. Always figuring out like, okay, how are we going to use this? Even our the microphones that I showed you.
My mom always said necessity breeds creativity.
And it has to. So these mics I 3D printed apart on their helmets, and when we go into performance capture, and it slides right in, so I can get that mic in the exact same location every shoot, no matter what. I love finding new methods because you can always look at the old school methods, and then you just reiterate on them. When Picasso said the best artists steal, and that's all I'm trying to do. I'm just stealing old ideas. I think we had a picture of that too, but yeah.
So we're talking about the mocap stuff. I'm going to pull up here and then I'm going to share. Okay.
Captain Price, SAS, you with me?
We have intel Russian troop commanders are in town today. We're going to ambush them.
We need to break this bastard, Captain. She's going for a bloody detonator. Good job we dropped her then.
Понял, прием! Быстрее! Ты что, с ума сошли? Не знаю! Сейчас! Срочно! Go! It's a shock hopper! Oh my God! Harold! I can't 318 will take us past Charing Cross. If we take the tube station.
So I have two different mics, but on the left we have a DPA headset mic. If you look at his head, that one with the furry ball. Yeah, that's the furry ball. And then the one on the right, it'd be his left, is the 4099. So you can see it at an angle right there. Same with her. There's a great angle. There's the 4099 on her left. And then that's a DPA 4060 headset mic that we actually have curved down. It's a cardioid, so it can help pick that up as well. Because we found you get different wind noise depending on how fast they move. So having different mics allows for just a cleaner sound in case something goes wrong.
That's amazing.
But yeah. And
so those are two mics, or is there a third? Or
there's two mics right there right now.
Okay, I see.
For if they were talking on a radio, I actually got the Sennheiser broadcast headset that they use for NFL announcers, and we'd have them use that because it created a different dynamic mic sound. And I left in a lot of the breathing and breath noises on it because they would be talking into a radio. I'm not going to clean that up.
I see in this shot with the Captain Price character on the right there. I could see, is that the same DPA mic, that little mini shotgun?
That is it. And if you see the little white piece, it's under the time code there, but that's the 3D printed part that it just slides into every time.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you were using that 3D printed part for the mocap
Yep.
Before COVID.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
Before COVID, you were using that. That's amazing.
Yeah, because it
cool.
creates recreatable sounds. So
right
between scenes, it sounds near the same.
They do sessions. They do tons of sessions. I mean, they do 60 days of sessions or something. Yeah. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, the recreatability is super important.
So how many files are we talking about here at the end of the day? Like, between multiplayer and campaign and everything. I mean, I'm afraid to ask.
For Dialog, it's over 100,000, and that's just one language. So, and then we have 10 languages that we localize into. So we get into about a million Dialog files.
Wow, that's astounding. Really, that's amazing.
Yeah, I try not to think about it that big and just go a day at a time.
Well, I mean, there's more work that you have to do to make sure that you're getting consistency because you're working remotely. So, I mean, it's amazing that you're coming up with ways to sort of create that repeatability, right? To have that consistency. That's wow. My hat's off to you guys. That's really cool.
Always capturing a great source. Obviously, you don't ever want to polish a turd. So that's all we're trying to do is capture the greatness that the actors are giving us, so we can make it sound great.
Do you find yourself spending a lot of time doing noise reduction, noise removal? I mean, across the board, not just dialogue, but with gun sounds and vehicle sounds and dialogue. I mean, is there a lot of that work? I'm sure that's kind of obvious, but I mean, it sounds like it would be compounded with the COVID stuff when you're doing the dialogue.
Yeah, it really depends on the actor and what environment they're in. But yes, there's a lot of noise removal, and how loud they are, right? And if they're screaming, I'm not going to have to do much noise removal. If they're whispering, I have to do quite a bit. So, yeah, but RX7 and now RX8, but RX7 has been great for that. Really
okay, the isotope products, yeah.
And I use Wavelab a lot for that too. They have a great spectral editor, and it's more a mastering program, but their spectral editor is really great, and it's a good destructive editor that I can go in quickly, clean that file a little bit more, and get it back into the game. So
spatialized audio has really become a big thing, which is great. I've been a fan of binaural audio, since my teens, right? And so I, as part of my research, found that you do offer in Call of Duty Modern Warfare the ability to use Dolby Atmos and I believe Windows Sonic. Am I correct in having the ability to switch between the two on PC and Xbox? Is that my understanding? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
And also for Sony, I know Sony has a proprietary system for 3D spatialization. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your approach and how what are some of the challenges associated with that? What does that provide for the player? That would be great.
The Sony stuff we didn't support. This is primarily using Dolby Atmos on Xbox and PC. The Sony one in particular requires you use one particular headphone made by Sony as well, so it's a really limiting factor. And we are trying to cover the widest player base that we can and try not to focus on people having to have very particular hardware as best we can. We are a game that is on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, so we're trying to do the best we can with each platform. But one of the great things for us was when we actually got Atmos working, and we have a full Atmos theater at the office. And the first time that we sat and played through some of the levels, we're like, oh, we've got to make some changes and fixes to this, because all of a sudden weird things are panning into the tops that you're not expecting just because the player has bent down to look at the ground. And you've got sounds coming from strange places. And we had to go back and remix certain parts of the game because we wanted to make sure that only things like helicopters or footsteps of people walking, or things that are a bullet crack that goes over your head, actually pay for those speakers and not everything. Because it really hurt the experience in some ways.
That's fascinating. Okay.
We had to go back and re-author some assets too, because there might be ambient sounds that we had done that is, a quad ambient of being in a room while it's raining outside. And normally you just make that quad sound, and suddenly we're like, there's no sounds coming from the ceiling, and it should be in Atmos. And so we had to split out a bunch of those rain sounds so we could have them on the ceiling when you're listening in Dolby Atmos.
I mean, do you find that the elevation, having the ability to place sounds above you, is that something that is now just adds another dimension? I mean, are you finding that players really appreciate that? And also, do you appreciate it as sound people? Like, wow, this just adds a whole other dimension. I'm just curious from a feedback standpoint, like what are you getting from your players?
I haven't seen much of players playing in Atmos. I haven't read a bunch of Reddit messages about it or anything like that. When we play it, it's kind of game changing to me. Like what kill streaks sound like, what an Apache sounds like when it flies in above you in Atmos versus playing the game normally. It's game changing. It sounds amazing. Things like footsteps we were talking about before. It's hard to tell when there's somebody. Is he occluded in the next room, or is he occluded in the next room upstairs? And suddenly you have him in Atmos, and you hear doof, 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 doof above you. It's like, oh, you could pinpoint that guy and shoot the ceiling above you, and shoot him through the ceiling. And so there's game information that you can get in Atmos that a normal player wouldn't get. I probably just sold a few Atmos.
There you go. Yeah.
But
do you hear that?
I would think. I would think that that we would have gotten more feedback or heard more people who are like, "Oh, this is amazing in Atmos." But I think it's still probably growing. Early on there wasn't that many people playing in surround, and now it's kind of taken for granted. There's a lot more home systems.
Well, it's just a matter of educating people too, and that's why we're, to some degree. I mean, we're calling this the Audiophile Gamer Podcast. Sorry to plug that, but I mean, there's a reason. It's because, I want members of our community, our colleagues as audio designers and developers, but also the players to kind of hear from you as the people creating the content. Like, well, here are some of the things to think about that may not necessarily, you may not be aware of. So things like spatialization and using technology that's used in VR, and now having the ability to extend that other dimension so that you can hear sounds above you. I mean, think about this. I remember playing back in the day, and having a sniper, you don't know where that sniper is. Well, if that sniper's in a tower, if you don't have those elevation channels, you won't know that person is above you as opposed to behind you, or, somewhere off in another direction. I mean, or like you said, someone who's above you and the floor above you, you won't know until you have that added height information, which now is provided. That's fantastic.
With Atmos and elevation channels, we're also able to clean up the mix, do some of the stuff that they have kind of mastered in films, where you can pull things off the fronts. You can make room in your mix so that fronts can really be the important things, like the weapon and the dialogue, and mainly the weapon.
Interesting.
So music, you can kind of pull off of the fronts, and it cleans up your mix quite a bit.
That's really, really good. Interesting actually, because there's more space, if you will, to move sound around. So that does sort of, it's less dense, and you have more a larger sound field to work with, and as opposed to everything being just sort of scrunched in. I think that's really, really something I think people should take notice of, for sure.
Yeah, I noticed there seems to be a marriage right now between Dolby Atmos and
mm-hmm.
Avid, and I'm assuming that's healthy. I don't know much about Dolby Atmos or trying to mix in it, but I can tell you, I'm hearing hints now that music's going to
mm-hmm.
go away, because music's going to follow. This follows games. It ain't the other way around like it used to be. So we are going to be, some of us will be kicking and screaming, but we're going to get dragged into this at some point. So I better start getting my ears right and get my studio right.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, Atmos for headphones is actually a really good platform for most people playing the game. If they have Atmos on headphones, they don't need to buy all the speakers and, install speakers in their ceiling. It works pretty well depending on, a lot of different factors, your headphone type, your ear type, and all that stuff. But it's a good product, I would say, for most people who are just playing on headphones. It will give them more information in it.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it too is that you don't have to buy special headphones. Like any stereo pair of headphones will be able to do the work for you. So,
can I just say, I mean, if Sony's listening, I think it's crazy to completely vertically integrate and requiring certain headphones for a user experience. I mean, I'll just say that, just my personal opinion.
Get a phone call now.
No, I mean, we wanted to, because, the reality is people are using different kinds of headphones and aren't necessarily able to just buy one headphone for one thing. Right. So
it does come off
yeah.
a little elitist.
So,
things have changed. You're going to see a lot of different things with the PlayStation 5. you're already seeing that they've adopted completely new systems and tech specifically for sound. So our brothers in arms, so to speak, Treyarch, were the first to actually tackle that, and that's Cold War that just came out.
Okay.
We'll get to actually dive into that very soon ourselves for our next project.
Right. Yeah, and you as developers have to be aware of, okay, well, there's the effort that you need to do for one platform, but you also have to, take into account all these other platforms and make sure that there's a consistency across those. So yeah, that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, there's a lowest common denominator that we have to make sure that the game experience, the feedback from the game is as equal on all platforms, so that particularly now that Call of Duty is crossplay,
right?
You can have a buddy play on PC, you're on PlayStation, you have another buddy on Xbox, and you can all play together, which was not possible before, and it's just fantastic. Uniting our player base, allowing them to interact in different ways than they could before has just been amazing.
I want to touch on the challenges associated with creating a mix with such complexity. So you have gunshots, which are like the loudest things ever you can record. I mean, SPLs of 160 dB, right? And you have music, you have dialogue, you have ambient sounds and, environmental sounds. Like, how are you doing it? I mean, maybe touch on, just the complexity of it and some of the hard choices you have to make to make it enjoyable for users and players.
Dave, you want
I was going to say, Dave started, we can talk about campaign, and then we can go to Tim and we can start talking about all the fully interactive stuff with Warzone and multiplayer.
Great.
Yeah, so for mixing, campaign primarily, is a narrative type of mix where we are focused on the storytelling part. And so that means, dialogue will have to sit properly and believably. We have to make sure that there's context in the game for the dialogue to be said. So, a guy who is 100 yards away shouldn't be whispering to you at that time, So that comes down to working with design, working with the writers, figuring out, okay, how are we going to tell this story if the user can hang back and be 100 feet away from this person when they're going to say the line? That's not going to work for everybody. So a lot of it comes down to design and then making room. It's all about making room and pacing. So we're not going to have music going all the time. We're not going to have big battles all the time. So making space for everything is super important. And when we're in those battles, we have systems in the game where, we're doing micro mixing, little tiny ducks, really quick, kind of ducks and, filters, little tiny filter ducks and all kinds of stuff that happens in real time that we specify, and we don't want to ever take the player out by doing too much and making it audible. So we don't want pumping. We don't want, things that are going to kind of distract the player from their space. So again, we make space, we pace it out, we make it in context, and the mix, with all the great source that we have, it comes from many different places. Everybody contributes to the amazing source assets and everything. So all of that combined then has a space and a time to actually play and be heard.
It's also really interesting for Tim and for Dave, when narrative has an idea that doesn't really work sometimes, where there's two guys talking quietly next to an idling helicopter, and how those conversations have to happen where not everybody anticipates the audio issues that can come up.
What are you saying? What?
Well, that's funny you bring that up, because there was a scene in our cinematics that there were two helicopters that came in, right? And they were shooting it on stage, and the actors were way too quiet for me. So I called up Stu while we were on the stage. I was like, Stu, send me send me something with two helicopter blades. I'm going to play it through the speakers and show these guys how loud it should be. And so then I grabbed the sample of helicopters, and before the scene, I just started playing it. And I was like, you guys need to talk at least a little bit over this. And awesome. It did. It helped them push it way up, and it helped it get that in their mind.
So, Dave, you mentioned ducking, which is something I always say to young engineers I talk to with music. It's the most underused tool in the shed. But I've noticed, especially with what you're doing, if you're ducking something below a vocal or something that's kind of mid-rangey, that's easy to hear detail in, I noticed that if the decay or the release is too sharp, it may not pump, but it has kind of a weird, like, hey man, make sure you it's not it's some kind of a little gradual art form to that in music also. I tried doing brick wall stuff and it just sounds like shit.
Yeah, we have real-time stuff in the game that we can specify basically a set of voices or a type of sound and how to filter it and what that timing and curve will be when it gets triggered, so like you fire a gunshot and you're going to duck background walla, it's unimportant compared to the player's gunshot, just for that moment though, and you got to make it work for all guns, and so there's a lot of trial and error with that.
Yeah, man, the attention to detail is just crazy. Yeah. You're talking about using all these tools for one project. I might use one of those tools maybe every 6 projects. You know what I mean? Like compression ducking, I don't do that much. I usually just program it out when I'm writing the music, but it is necessary, especially when you're doing EDM and stuff like that. So very interesting to hear that you guys use that stuff too. That's crazy. Better than riding faders.
Anthony, one of the things that's, for us in the interactive audio industry, we sort of get, but what makes games really difficult is the player can move at any given time and the situation can completely change on you. And so having to take into account all the variations and all the possible interactive, I mean, it's almost impossible to do, but you as game developers, and I'm curious to, touch on that with you guys, like, gosh, I mean, that just presents so many permutations that you kind of have to think about. Whereas in linear media or music or, film or TV, it's sort of like, you know what's going to happen, right? You can.
Yeah, you deliver the master exactly. And that's it.
The game is going to change on you. I mean, the player could do something. You're like, wait a minute, I didn't think about that. Holy cow. And now it's kind of broken, and which happens all the time.
Especially in multiplayer, I would say that the mix of it is just as much systems as it is setting volume. And so you have there's 4 dudes in front of you. They're all shooting different weapons. And one is triggering a long duck because he's shooting a sniper rifle. Another guy is triggering a really short duck. Somebody else is yelling. All of those ducks are happening the same time. And we had to plan out, like, if you have all these ducks happening at the same time, which filter do you take? Which volume do you take? What level is my player volume going to end up being? And we have to design these systems to work with each other. And we can't experience every single possible thing that's going to happen. We just can't. You have 100 people, 150 people.
I was going to say, now add Battle Royale, and that's like...
So when we started Warzone, it was, I would say like November, December last year, around this time a year ago. We're starting to run into some weird mix and voice allocation issues, and I scripted up a sequence in game that was just make everything happen. So it's like, it wasn't, people weren't really there. It's just trying to play way more sounds than we can play, have way more situations happening than we can actually do in game, and just see what happens. So like, if I have 50 sniper rifles going off at the same time as a truck is driving by, what happens? And then changing the rules to try to make it play what you want to hear in those situations. So just, intentionally breaking the game and then saying, what's the best that we can do?
That's amazing.
Because we can't play everything. We can't listen to everything, but we're trying to do the best that we can with.
So have you developed like we've seen the term HDR, high dynamic range. Do you have your own system that basically manages and ducks sounds based on context and things like that? I mean,
it's not just the HD. basically does the same, but it's not one system that does that. There's priority for voices, priority for streams, priority for 2D sound, first person player sounds, and then the ducks associated with higher priority sounds and that. So it's a lot of systems working together.
Got it. Okay.
A lot of crazy algorithms. Just hearing it is like, okay, if I'm stomping on the ground, it's different than if I'm lightly moving through grass. It's just crazy.
It's one of my favorite experiences playing the game was it was in Ground War, in the Ground War mode, which is like 50v50 matches, a lot of people playing. And it was right after that went live. I was playing the game live and saw a tank up on a ridge shooting down into the play space. Somebody else shot fired a cruise missile at him, blew up the tank, and then a dead body fell out of the tank, rolled down the cliff, and slumped down at my feet. And all of it worked.
Unbelievable.
And it's like all these things that I'd seen individually, but never seen them play this sequence. And like seeing a dead body ragdoll down the cliff and go, and make the correct sound as it fell at my feet. I was like, oh my God, it all worked. And and we you can't plan that out. You can't say like, okay, you fire a cruise missile now. You can't imagine every situation that's going to happen. But then when we go play the game and say it's working, it's really rewarding and awesome to see.
Well, and it's really tough because we'll want to go in and play the game specifically to listen. And we're in these huge playtests of 100, 150 people. You can't tell them, don't shoot me. They don't know which one you are. So you'll be sitting there trying to critically listen. Is this working? Oh, can I hear that sniper over there? And then get shot in the head. You're like, oh, okay, I got to start all over again.
And Tim, I remember a bunch of times where Tim would say, well, there's going to be scenarios where there's going to be 40, 50 people trolling someone else, and they're all going to be trying to do the same thing at one time. So we need to be able to make sure that we can absorb that without it freaking out or, shutting down the consoles. It's just so many interesting anticipations. Yeah,
we killed it.
Tim is thinking ahead, like so far ahead of anything I can do. But it's incredible. All these guys and their different. Everybody's kind of complementary, where nobody's got everything, but we all work together in a way because we all bring something unique to the table. And it's just so interesting sometimes the conversations that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, the conversations, like we'll be out to lunch or something and we'll be sitting in a booth, and we'll be talking about the game and we'll be like, yeah, I shot that guy in the head and, and then he came up behind me and he didn't really die. And then he came up behind me and stabbed me in the back. And, but I went ahead and shot the woman anyways, and it's like, you wonder what people are looking at you.
My grandmother's rolling in her grave right now. You boys done found the devil.
There's a baby in the game that's actually, it was my baby because I had a newborn. And my wife came to me one day because she knew I recorded that. And she's like, you can shoot the baby? You can. And I was like, well, we quit the game on him. We don't, we make them restart the level. She's like, but they can shoot the baby? I'm like, yeah, but it works really well.
How to let the baby pull out the Desert Eagle?
That'd be awesome.
I remember getting a bug on that, and I was like, make sure that the baby stops crying when shot.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, that's in one of the like when you go in night vision mode, right? And one of the levels, and like you're in there and you're trying to find someone, and you shoot someone and the baby cries obviously because they hear the gunshot, or he or she hears the gunshot. So yeah, and then but that's the scary part. I mean, and you're in a small enclosed environment in a home or an apartment or whatever, and there's collateral damage, which is sad. But that's wild.
And that kind of goes back to some of the narrative morals that they were trying to tell. So, and I'll say this: when Dave gave me that file of his kid crying, it was the worst. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to edit. It was like heartbreaking. It was a heartbreaking couple hours trying to make a loop, of baby crying.
Yeah, because you wonder, what was this baby really crying about?
He was sleep training. He was sleep training his kid.
Training him. Yeah.
And
Oh, he's sleep training.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so heartbreaking. Every single cry. I'm just
it's echoing through the halls, and it just elicits this primal response from everybody. It's one of those sounds that just cuts right to the core of your humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
Good thing you didn't turn that shit up in your condo. They'd have called the police on your ass. Some guy in there shooting at a baby.
Oh my God. Yeah, exactly. The baby sound with the gunfire, like playing
with a helicopter in the room.
There's some good sound design elements in there too. Some pterodactyls and other calls.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What are some of the craziest sounds you've had to layer to make something more, I'm just wondering. I mean, pterodactyls, there's no live pterodactyls, obviously. So you had to like create that. I
did something similar to that.
Yeah. Oh yeah?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did. I could tell you a real quick one.
T-Rex.
I did this album called Return of the Bumpasaurus. Right? So at the start of it, I wanted to get this T-Rex kind of Godzilla, this big, he rises from the water and walks on the land, and you hear this rumbling. And keep in mind, now I'm the poor man's version of what Dave and these guys do, right? So first thing I did is I got a basketball, and I went to a gym, an empty gym, threw the basketball up and let it bounce, right? Did it again, let it bounce, recorded that. Then back then I had a pond in my backyard, and I took like big boulders, threw them straight up and let them drop in the pond. Did that. And then I kind of got on the mic and started doing this, all that bullshit. And then I just put it all, I just started detuning it and doing it, and ended up, it sounded like a monster rising from the water, growling. And then each step I would mix the splash from my pond with the basketball in the gym that was detuned, so it wasn't going, pah, it was going, boom. Then another step, and everybody's like, how'd you get that shit? And I started lying then. Well, I used to work on a movie set. Started bullshitting people. That's the first time I've ever really told that story publicly. That's actually how I made those sounds. And to this day, I'm really proud of that. The song sucked.
That's awesome.
You know what, Anthony? You're a sound designer.
Yes, he is. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I couldn't do it. No, I'm too lazy to do what these guys do. I can tell you now. Hell no. I'm too lazy.
You doing something
Another
right,
take? What the fuck? When's lunch break?
And some of those days are really long. You're just getting up when the sun comes up, and you're only just picking up cables and gear as the sun's going down, and you do it again the next day and the next day.
Angry wives.
Yeah, there's a bunch of that too. You're gone for a week playing in the desert. You're like, no, you don't understand. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. 14-hour days in the sun.
It's not like you were under an umbrella.
You come back, you come back all banged up from these shoots, and people are like, well, I hope that was fun, as if you were just kind of lounging around the whole time. It's like, no, I was getting my ass kicked that entire time.
It's like, we went out into the desert. It's 114 degrees. We build a wall out of cinder blocks, blow it up, rebuild it, blow it again. And it's just doing that over and over. It's hard physical labor.
Not to mention you probably had a couple of encounters with some rattlers, scorpions, shit like that.
Seen some. Haven't had any close calls.
Anything with more legs than me, I don't fuck.
You know what? Well, I was watching one of the videos. In fact, I'm going to pull it up here because talk about explosions. Because wow, maybe is one of the coolest things I've seen. Hold on, I'm going to pull up this video, gentlemen. I noticed that because of the speed of sound and versus speed of light, there's a delay, right? So the explosion happens and then you hear the sound. And it was so awesome to actually see that in the game. And that scene that I played from the gameplay, kind of reflected that. And it was just so gratifying to see something like that, because it's exactly how real life is.
Absolutely.
I think this is...
Go ahead.
I think this is something else that is, like you were talking about before, of movies and other media starting to blend in and give people's expectations. We wanted to do as well. I haven't worked in Call of Duty as long as some of the other guys, but back in Ghosts, we wanted to do some large explosions that were time delayed by speed of sound, and we would get bugs on them from our QA that, hey, this is playing late. This isn't matching the picture.
That's great.
And it just wasn't accepted yet, and so we didn't do it. But it's something that we've wanted to do all along. And Steven made the call right away on this game. He was like, "We're doing it this game. Everything speed of sound, explosions, gunfire, anything that is loud and at a distance, and you'd expect to be delayed. We're going to do speed of sound delay." And that was just like, okay. We got to do systems for it. We've got to make sure we're doing it in cinematic sequences. We've got to make sure that we have the math right for all of our bullet whiz bys and bullet impacts and everything. But nobody, when the game came out, nobody said, "Hey, this is wrong." Since it's correct and it's across the whole game and it's the correct math, everybody's just like, "Yeah, this seems right."
That's what I was going to ask you about. Yeah, it seems well received.
Yeah, and I haven't seen anybody say like, I don't understand why this explosion is delayed or anything. If it was just one across the whole game, it wouldn't be right. But since the whole game takes place in this certain sonic reality, then it's correct, and everybody has just gone.
Yeah,
along
I
with
totally
it.
agree. And the other thing that has helped is honestly YouTube, where where you'll have a picture or a video of an explosion, where
that's a good
these
point.
things happening in real life, big loud events, volcanoes or car crashes or war footage, things like that. Yeah,
happening
it's helped
off in
a lot.
the distance.
Like between that confluence of cinema and people experiencing things via YouTube, it's allowed us to pursue that, and we might not have gotten away with it otherwise.
That's interesting. So maybe people are sort of used to it on a subconscious level,
They never saw it real before. They never saw it real. And then when people blow shit up on YouTube, you go, "Oh, that's not what I thought it would sound like."
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden they're acclimated to it. They get it.
Exactly.
That's right. It's a natural effect. Sound travels slower than light. So as people experience the real world, and now through YouTube videos and things showing war events and now with the game, it just sounds natural. So people just accept it.
Looking at this clip Mike has up here now, it looks like Attack of the Flying Jellyfish.
Well, I love this. I mean, that ring.
That's what I mean. It looks like a flying jellyfish.
I love it. That is awesome. Yeah, you all just captured some really cool stuff.
Regarding the speed of sound too, I think it's a real life simulation that adds to the fear factor in the game. So like Anthony was saying, people haven't experienced it before, and now they're kind of acclimated to it. So when they hear that in the game, they go, "Oh shit, that's real." I'm in a real area. This is reality, and it helps bridge that gap for them to kind of put down the walls and say, "I'm in this game."
I got to tell you, with just the animation technology, with the amazing immersive sound that you've created, just everything coming together, the graphics quality, everything. I mean, I was watching and even playing, to some degree, but even watching the videos, it felt like I was watching a movie. Like when you're playing, it's like, okay, I'm in a game, whatever. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is awesome, but I'm playing and I'm trying to, stay alive. But then when you watch the video, you're sort of like, oh my God, this looks like a film. It feels and sounds like a film. It's unbelievable. So kudos to you guys, man. It just really, really killed it. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. I was thinking, is there anything you all want to maybe bring up that maybe you feel like, hey, there's one thing I want to talk about. and then, cause I know now we're coming on 3 hours, but, I could talk about this all day, but, I want to, don't want to take too much of y'all's time, but, anything you want to sort of thinking of in terms of maybe closing thoughts or comments or something you want to bring up? Anybody?
Any longer, you motherfuckers got to pay me.
Anthony, when COVID's over, do you want to come by the studio?
Oh, definitely.
You guys
Definitely.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Oh, yes.
Can I come too?
Yeah, go for it.
I want to
Definitely.
go.
Absolutely.
I would love to go. Yeah.
I am so in because I just love this stuff, man. I nerd out on this stuff every day. Like other artists come over here to get me to produce shit for them, and they're like, "You do know I'm not paying you." I don't give a shit. Let's do it, because I love creating, man.
That's awesome.
We'd love to have you guys.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
We like big sounds, and
Yeah.
I think my colleagues would not contradict me on that.
Yes.
That's awesome. What's the biggest sound you recorded? I mean, was it the M1? Like, I'm just curious, like, what was the loudest thing you recorded?
I think the loudest thing for me was the tank live fire with the Abrams.
Wow.
It was shockingly powerful to the point where we were completely unprepared for the first shot. We were about 15 yards off to the side the very first time that it went off, and there was and we had Kevlar vests on, helmets, and everything else, and for me, I'm wearing earplugs and headphones, trying to catch the sound and protect my ears as best as possible. But it went boom, and our clothes were pinned to us like just this energy and wind and heat that came off of that thing, and we all just kind of looked at each other dumbfounded and we're like, holy shit. And then together we've had opportunities like some of the video you saw. We go out and record explosions. And I think where that kind of got us again was just the impact of an explosion was, I think it was 150 pounds of ammonium nitrate fuel oil that we had buried just below the ground. And when that went boom, and you get that delay because we were 200 yards off of the explosion, and you watched the ground around you, and like dirt and dust literally jumped off the ground, even at that distance, and it was shocking the power that came from that. And then you had to immediately do what the explosives experts were telling us, like, don't look down. Don't duck, look up. You have to watch for what's coming. Because dirt, you don't know what it's going to kick up into the air. And when we say kick up into the air, we mean, hundreds of feet up into the air. So you start watching for rocks or dirt clods or whatever else that come raining down to make sure that if it's anything, you can step inside and get out of the way. That's where that story about Chris Staples wearing a bucket on his head was from that shoot. He walked down around the corner in the valley that we were in, and we didn't know. He hadn't told us right away that he was getting a lot of debris. Even to one point, we blew up a 50-gallon oil drum, and it shot straight into the air, and a piece of it landed probably 5 feet from him. You can't sit in that spot anymore. You need to put your mics there remotely, and you need to move.
Right. That's incredible. Wow.
You wouldn't have to tell me twice.
We've had a couple of close calls as that goes, but everybody's still here. Everybody still has all their fingers and toes and everything, so we're doing okay.
I remember that explosion lifting my feet. Like I felt it lift me up off the ground.
Damn.
It traveled through the ground and it was so big.
Wow.
It was immediately 200 feet in the air. I mean, the smoke was just like, I'm immediately in the air.
That's amazing.
The very first one that we did, our visual effects director at the time who was with us filming, forgot that it was a sound shoot. And just started screaming, "Fuck yeah!" and hollering and all kinds of stuff. We're like, how do I come out and say it?
That would have been me probably. I know I'd ruin it.
Yeah, we figure
some guy pissed himself in the middle of our shit.
We figure everybody gets a mulligan on that. Where the sound shoot, you get one.
Yeah.
And, but that's it. And you got, if you take your one, make it good. If you can.
It's usually the Barrett at the gun shoots. Like nothing prepares you for it. It's so much louder than everything else. And we'll have been out there recording guns for like 3 days, and all of a sudden the Barrett comes out, and it's like you're not really ready. And somebody every time is going to be like, "Oh my god!" It's in like, shh. We're still trying to get the tail, but it's just so loud. Somebody's going to hear it for the first time and say something.
I seen a guy fire a Barrett, and he was, prone on the ground, right? And you could see his back compress, like his spine compressed from, the recoil of the gun. I was like blown away. That's just, it's literally a cannon. It's basically a cannon.
You can also see in the dirt from where the muzzle brake is, you can actually see the waves form in the dirt.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's amazing. Anthony, what do you think, man? Is there anything you want to, you're thinking of that you want to ask? Ask it now. Forever hold your peace.
Good, man. I'm good. I got some leftover peach cobbler in the fridge.
Oh, yeah. Nice. It's about that time.
You didn't bring it.
About that time.
The last sugar I'm going to eat for a while. I got to get my ass on the treadmill now and work this shit out.
Yeah. I can't tell you how thrilled I am that you all took time to sit down with Anthony and I and talk about this really cool stuff that you have all done, and your passion really shows through. And that's what our podcast is all about, is just sharing stories and sharing talking about something we all have in common, and that is a passion for sound and passion for games and how it all sort of comes together. So I really appreciate your time. So
this is cool stuff, man. I mean, I learned a lot.
Great.
Same for me, man. This was very educational. Yeah. So
Grandma used to say, "You never get too old to put fat on your head." So I'm learning something.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, it's an honor for us to be here. So thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Have a good one, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely.
All right.
Sounds great.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Be safe.
Thanks
Take
again.
care. Bye-bye.